Okay, welcome Rumblers and YouTubers, even though they banned my friend Megan Fox, who has interviewed my friend John C. Wright over here, who is a very prolific author, which I interviewed about a month or so ago, and we went on and on for like 3.5 hours, and I've had to break it up into 3 segments, but it was a recording. And John has agreed to come back and subject himself to my wonderful chat, who are very polite and kind, and to my additional further questions. So welcome, John, to Rumble and other platforms.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
And just so that everybody knows, the introductions shall begin. But he is a prolific writer, a lawyer, but he doesn't claim to be a lawyer, but a prolific writer.
A failed lawyer.
A failed lawyer, but a successful science fiction fantasy author and science fiction fantasy. And I am working my way. I was showing him my pile of John C. Wright books, and this is only a few of them. I think you've authored what, 28 some novels?
I lost count.
Lost count. People like to yell.
No, that's not because there's a lot of books. That's just because my counting skills are extraordinarily poor. Don't mistake the measurement.
Okay, well, I'm impressed, but people like to yell at me because I'm always writing a book. And I've only got 3, and you've got tons. And I will say, and since we last talked, I would say that I was working.
Let me interrupt. I married an author, so who else is going to yell at me?
Well, first, I better make sure I'm working on Rumble here. Are we working on Rumble? Come on, chat. Say hello. Hello. Can you see me? Yes, we're live on Rumble. Rumble's the one I care about because that's a free speech platform. And you know how important free speech platforms are.
Yes, the forces of evil are trying to destroy our society, and they're working through YouTube to do it. I believe they've outlawed everyone who votes Republican now, or something like that, or any Christian.
Or anybody that disagrees
if you're seen crossing yourself on screen, YouTube will ban it as hate speech. I believe that's the new rule.
Who knows? The rules are invisible, but you must comply. Yes, as
a failed lawyer, even I know that the whole purpose of invisible rules is to terrify the populace into submission. That's why written law is such a good idea.
Yes, I agree with this quite a bit. Gee, amazing. Lawyers that agree. This is frightening.
Lawyers agree that law is useful to run society. Yes. Well, the guy in Shakespeare who said, "Let's kill all the lawyers," was saying that in order to say in the scene how you would destroy society quickly. So. Ask the Hatfields and the McCoy how it works out to just take the law into your own hands to settle disputes.
Well, you hear a lot about Nazi doctors. You don't hear much about Nazi lawyers. Let me just introduce you though, because you're a very important person, and I'm humbled to have you on. But I want to show you.
The honor is all mine, but I have to insist that you not compliment me too often.
I know.
Because then my sense of honesty requires me to correct you, and I have to down talk myself, which as an egotist I find uncomfortable. So.
Okay, and it's hard because I'm a positive kind of person, and I think the world is covered with negativity and lies. So I only compliment one that's truthful, but also to bring brightness and lightness into the world because we've got so many negative forces impacting on ourselves.
I am a writer, I'm an author, and therefore I'm an egomaniac. So offering me a compliment is like offering a drink to a drunkard. I've already got too inflated an opinion of myself. I don't need your help to support it. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, it's okay. I'm joining you, so we have another commonality. All right, so here's the first book that I read by Mr. John C. Wright, which was Orphans of Chaos, and an excellent book, I will say. It says a fantasy novel, and very good. And then the second.
Before you go on, let me pause to compliment the cover artist, which was done by Irene Gallo of Tor Books, was the one in charge of that, who made the woman on the cover look like the character I described. So I was pleased with that. They had to try to draw a hypersphere, a 4-dimensional ball, and they somehow managed to make it look persuasive to the eye. So there we go.
Well, it is reflective of the content. It's an interesting concept, and we're gonna talk about some of these imaginative ideas because the title of this live stream is Beauty and the Muse.
Okay.
And those are 2 topics that we discussed in our earlier chat. But have impacted me and kind of resonated with me. And after reading these novels and some other ones we'll point out, I want to discuss those concepts some more with you. But let's get through some of these books. So this is a three-parter, a trilogy, which is Fugitives from Chaos, and then Titans of Chaos, which was the grand finale where all the battles occurred.
I had originally intended to extend it, if it sold well, into a long-standing permanent series, but that didn't happen. So I cut it off at the end point. There's still unresolved plot threads that I could use if I wanted to write a sequel, but it doesn't look like it's in the offering right now.
Well, you go where the muse takes you, right? And we're going to talk about
in this case where the market takes me,
or the market, yeah, as well. I don't have a market. I just have my chat people. And then I will say the next book I picked up is called City Beyond Time. Tales from the Fall of Metachronopolis. And this one, I will say, this actually scared me. This is a very dark and frightening bit of sci-fi and quite creative and inspired. And it is a series of what I would call short stories within the same universe.
Right.
With the same sort of world building behind it of time travelers and a kind of a contemplation of what time travel might entail and what kind of world would these time travelers live in. This is a great book. I would highly recommend. In fact, I would recommend this one. Well, if you're a sci-fi fan, this one, fantasy fan, this one. But let's talk about City Beyond Time, because I hadn't read this last time we interviewed it. Okay. And I'm going to ask my first question, and that is:
did you read any of Count to a Trillion? Because that's the other book that was on your.
Yes, here's Count to Trillions. I have not gotten to this. This is next up on the list. And then we also have this. This is the Golden Age novels, which are these are all on my list of. Yeah, I think you might have recommended these in this order, but there's the Golden Age. This is also a trilogy.
Yes.
The second one is the Phoenix Exultant.
Well, I'm going to make a request of you, since you compliment me so highly.
Yes.
Get my book of short stories called Feasts and Seasons. It's the only thing I've written that is not science fiction. It's a story about each short story takes place to honor a different holiday on the sacred calendar. On the sacred calendar. So there's one for Christmas and one for Easter and so on and so forth.
Okay.
They're all short stories. They're disconnected. It's an anthology.
Okay, excellent. Well, like I said, you have written some nonfiction, but I would say mostly you're known as fantasy and science fiction, right?
No, those Feasts and Seasons is fiction. It's just not science fiction.
Okay.
Some of it is slightly, science fiction only in flavor. I guess there's a spaceship in one of them.
There's a spaceship, so the spaceship's got to be in there somewhere, right?
I have a very simple rule of thumb: unicorns, Holy Grail, fantasy; spaceships, ray guns, science fiction.
Well, see, I'm a Holy Grail kind of guy, so I got to go with fantasy as my number one, my lead. Although I'm a big fan of Asimov, and Asimov, I'm a big fan of. I like his prolific nature and his themes of robots and his coherence of his world building. Mm-hmm. I've always admired old Mr. Asimov. But let me ask you, okay, I've got a question. Now, we are both big fans of Roger Zelazny.
Yes.
And Nine Princes in Amber. And we talked about that quite a bit. And I am just going to speculate here because we are both inspired by Zelazny's Amber series. To me, okay, let's just talk the concept here of there's one true thread of time, and that the time traveler creates alternative realities over time, but there's one true thread of time. And as he gets further and more he manipulates reality, the further away from the one true time he becomes until he dissipates into basically nothingness, right? To me, that reminded me quite a bit of the concept of the Amber, of the one true world and the shadow worlds. Was that conscious or unconscious, or you think I'm completely off?
You're seeing a pattern where none exists. You confessed you were a fantasy reader. How many time travel stories have you read?
Not enough.
Parallel timelines is an old standard. It's boilerplate science fiction idea. My take on it was slightly different, but I wasn't trying to analogize the base timeline where time travel doesn't exist, spoiler alert, to Amber or anything like that.
Okay. Well, I was
Yeah.
that's to make you relate to things.
You said though, if there was a similarity of mood, I noticed Zelazny, like me, likes certain types of tropes taken from hard-boiled science detective stories. His core one could have come out of the pages of Shell Hammett or something, you know. And one of my stories there is the same kind of stereotypical detective fellow.
Okay.
So,
Well, interesting.
No, two of them. Excuse me. Two of them star the detective. Who I forget his name. Florin, I think his name is.
Well, that robot thing that has the head with the head in it and it has this chopper, that thing creeped me out. I'll tell you that really disturbed me. You know, the time traveler had this like super advanced 40th century robot that could time travel and it would protect. And that thing was freaking scary, man. Did you mean it to be that scary?
No, I just plant the seeds. How that grows up in the field of your imagination is more you than me. So
well,
that's why I don't accept that many compliments on my writing. I do the part I do, but your imagination does the part you do.
right.
The thing I thought was clever as a writer, and now keep in mind, it's like talking to a magician about his stage magic. I see the background of where I put the mirrors and how I do the tricks and where I put the wires, and you see the performance. Okay, right. So to me, as the technician trying to trick you into believing in something that's not real, that's what I mean. Writers are liars. Let's just confess that point. The idea of telling a time travel story in non-chronological order, and I did it 3 times. I just thought was charming. I thought that was delightful, and the idea is not original to me. I got that from another writer, many other writers, in fact. So the first story is set in numbered chapters, but the number's not in order. If you took the time to rearrange it and read it in order, it would still make sense as a story. It just wouldn't be as dramatic.
Well, and that was really, tell you were throwing me for that because at first I'm like, what is going on with this? But yes, you had taken a story, and it's a time travel story, and
Right.
so the first chapter he takes, and it's like, okay, there's 18, 19, and then 3. What's this? And then it goes 4,
right,
and then 20. So it's a time travel in order of the time traveler, right?
Now, the last story is told in reverse chronological order. I tell the end of the story first and then the beginning. And by the time you get to the beginning, you realize the ending is not what you thought it was.
It's great. It's great. And now, when you wrote that, did you write it in order and then scramble it?
No, I wrote it as it stands, but I did put it in numerical order in another file to double check it to make sure I didn't make continuity errors. But no, I wrote it as it stands.
Yes, and this is the thing that I really want to learn from your wife and from you, but I'm pricking up because I'm mostly a nonfiction writer. But the planning that is obviously underlying the structure of the story here is quite unique. And there's how much pre-planning do you do before you start going?
It depends on the story. That one, 0. I sat down with a blank piece of paper and I wrote it. I came to the end, I stopped.
All right. Well, now this brings us to our first topic of the night, and that is the Muse. Mm-hmm. And you and I, we had a great discussion. If anybody didn't catch that, they can go back and look on my Rumble channel. We have a 3-part interview with you, and
is the other 2 parts published? I only saw the first one.
Yes, all 3 are up.
Okay, I just didn't see the other.
Yeah, everybody watched the first one. They didn't watch the second 2, but
sure they're there? I never saw them. I couldn't find them.
I don't know. They're there. There we go. They're sequential, you know. And I want to talk about the Muse, but we got to say hi to our chatters first. We've got Slidey Pie in here and Lovin' 2 Times. Lord of the Ree, of course. Lord of the Ree is here in our Rumblers. So hello to you, Rumblers. And over here, Owen Chandler.
Are those pen names, or did their mothers call them that when they were?
No, these are pen names. I suspect.
A married name or a maiden name in that case?
I don't know. You can and we're live. See, so this is the thing. You're live, so you chatters can rumble rant, and we will answer your questions. Okay, so we also have at YouTube Danielle, of course. Hi, Danielle. She's going to be on next Friday. Pyramid 7, Chandler Remington, my wonderful editor. She helped edit my book here.
But you see why I asked my question, because if Pyramid 7 had married a Mr. 3 rather than a Mr. 7, she'd just have to be Pyramid 3. It would just be an entirely different name.
See that this is the creative mind at work. I don't think these.
No, I'm being silly. I'm telling a stupid
Well,
joke. I think it's funny, but maybe no one else does.
We're going to talk about the Muse in a second, but let's see. The Freedom Ring, and Freedom Ring's a great guide. You're going to buy some law cards. Farmhand Tom and I have collaborated with law cards and definitely get your law cards. And Antron Hemingway, that's interesting. The Real Hydro PX. Right, wrong, Trump. Just Dawn, Soulless Jindler, hello. And Eliza, good. Brit Brat. We got a lot of folks here, and all of our good. These are good folks. These are all my. I had
amongst all these perfectly normal names. Occasionally, get some strange people who are called like Danielle and Eliza, and I'm not sure where those.
Danielle is an odd.
Where those names come from, but you know, the world is large, and it takes all time.
We can account for such strange names. Tweety U.S. News is here, and so let's yeah, I had a real first time I've ever had a troll in my internet. Last time I was a real anti-Semitic jerk who was Holocaust denier, got in my chat. And
the first person I ever banned from my live journal, my blog, was a Holocaust denier. Yeah. I couldn't believe any civilized man would dare such a thing in public. And I assume the anonymity of the internet is what let the devils come out.
Well, I have some theories.
I'm a Philo-Semite. I really don't like that kind of talk.
No, I don't either. And I was the first person I have ever banned from anything. I've never banned anybody.
Another thing we have in common.
Yeah, and he was my first person. As I banned him because he started ranting all kinds of Holocaust denial. And my uncle fought in World War II and was a witness to the camps.
My father-in-law was a photographer. He lied about his age to get into the military. He reporter. I'm sorry. What did I say? Photographer? Reporter. This is why you can't see a man next to his wife at a dinner because they'll tell the same story but not the same way. He the other soldiers mocked him for him getting a job as on the reporter on the Stars and Stripes because he would be behind the lines and they would be up ahead. Well, as it happened, he got sent ahead of the lines and he was there at one of the prison camps to photograph. I'm not to photograph, to write up the story of the Americans beating the Russians. Mm-hmm. And he came up to the camp and there were people behind the wire and no one was doing anything. The soldiers were standing on one side waiting for a carpenter to come by with tools. And he was so angry that they would simply stand and wait while prisoners were still behind the wire that he reached up and grabbed the fence and by brute force with his bare hands ripped it asunder. Okay, they gave him a Purple Heart for that, but he was so embarrassed that he would get a Purple Heart for wounding his hands for not, when other people get it for getting shot by the enemy.
Right.
And he didn't accept it. But in my heart, I still think he deserved it. So, and he was a Jew, just by the way. Mm-hmm. So that guy, I mean, do the Holocaust deniers think that my father-in-law lied to me about?
Right. Well, my uncle always used to sit me down and says, anybody, I saw it. I saw the bodies stacked up like cordwood. I will tell you, if anybody ever tells you, I saw it. I mean, he was a good man. And I also had a good friend of mine who's Jewish persuasion, and we had him over for dinner, and I was talking with his wife about our family histories, and like my family goes way back to the French and Indian War. We had a Ghazni that fought with Washington, and the French and Indian War was an old Virginia regiment. You're in Virginia, right? So
yes, I'm an honorary Virginian. I was born in California, but I don't tell anyone that nowadays because I'm just secretly hoping the San Andreas Fault will throw them into the sea any minute now.
You're a Virginian, right?
Yes, I certainly am. So why would I be from any other place? And it's a Commonwealth, thank you, not a state.
Right. Oh boy, that's the minutia that only a lawyer would know.
Nix tempo terranis.
Well, anyway, so I had my.
You are a Latin scholar. You do know of which I speak, do you not?
Latin. I try to avoid. I try to speak real languages like English. So
wait. That's res ipsa loquitur. How can you say that? So.
I don't know. What does that mean again? So let's just say
you know what res ipsa loquitur means, you lawyer.
We're having fun. I don't want to talk about law. I want to talk about fun stuff, right?
Okay.
So let's talk about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
No. So
I will say one thing about the Holocaust, just really quickly. The devil gave mankind the ability to lie. Okay, but the God gave poets the ability to lie for the sake of truth. So anytime a fiction writer is writing the truth, he's just writing it not literally, okay? And he's trying to undo what the devil does who's trying to distort the power of speech. So,
well, so my friend who I consider is Jewish, and we were talking with his wife. We were talking all this family history, and he was silent the whole night. And then I, finally it's like, well, what's going on? What about your family? And he says, my family stops at 1945 because his entire family, every single one of them, was killed in Romania. He was the only survivor from any family that he knew. He was the only survivor. And so it's like, okay, well, where did those people go, Mr. Holocaust denier?
I believe that Holocaust denial comes from the same mindset that wants to sexually mutilate children and to groom them for sexual adventures at a young age. And it also hates virginity. If you notice, in old stories, women were portrayed as being pure and eager for marriage, and in modern stories, they're not. Because I think there's some force in the world, I won't say who it is, who doesn't like the Jews, doesn't like virgins, and doesn't like mothers, and certainly does not like any Jewish virgin mother. This is my son Roland in the background.
Hi, son. Bill, you can see we were a professional operation here. Hey, all right. Well,
I'm calling from my house, so
it's great. I love it. I think it's cool, and I love we're
my daughter's preparing dinner in the background, so there's going to be noise and commotion going on at all times.
No problem. All right, so I do have a couple more people here, and I need to recognize them. There's Mr. the Expert, who is awesome. We was in last night. He was there. He was a witness to my little banning thing. I'm trying to get Law Nerd Clips to clip it because I want to be on Law Nerd Clips. It's one of my bucket list items. And then the next thing is we've got Danielle said that, and who else was in here? Oh, Let's Go Brandon. Let's Go Brandon is one of my biggest supporters. He's a great guy, and he always pays me to drink. So before we get into that, what is your position on alcoholic consumption online?
I don't have a position for other people. I'm a teetotaler.
Okay. So it wouldn't be above you if I actually partook.
Above me?
Well,
I have no control over your bizarre actions. If you want to slosh your brain with the demon alcohol, I have no objection.
Okay. Well, because he bribes me, that he pays me to do these things. I don't know. Don't ask me. I'm just the recipient of the wealth.
I used to tend bar, and so I do know when to cut people off, and you're not at that stage yet, though.
I haven't drank anything yet.
So the fact that you invited me on board the podcast does give me some doubt. So why don't you drink in moderation for now?
How about this, where we could drink wine rather than sidecar? We could go with some very fine.
Don't say we. I don't drink any alcohol.
Well, me and Let's Go Brandon. I wasn't saying maybe some good fine port. Like I have my favorite is Taylor Fladgate 40-year-old port, which is an $80 bottle of wine around here. So if you wish, I will partake in a nice fine red port at your request. And you know the deal. He knows the deal.
I have no preference, no influence, and I don't know what other things you're talking about are. I don't recognize the names of those things. I don't drink. I've never drank.
No problem.
My family drinks.
And then we also have Lord of the Ree giving me money, and he says, "Hey Gosney, feel free. Oh, feel free to wait till the end of to read this." Okay. Here, this is always if you want, it's a bit of a downer. My family could use some prayers. Just found out my aunt passed away over the weekend from a brain aneurysm. Well, God bless you. We are both Catholic, and I will say a prayer. I will include you in my prayers, Mr. Lord of the Ree. He's also one of my good supporters. Mm-hmm. And well, before we get into the Muse,
I'm going to interrupt. Hey, if you guys are going to eat, could you do it downstairs? I realize that it's you're probably not going to make any noise, but I'd like to minimize the background noise. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Lord of the Ree. She was 51, my mom's oldest sister. But I'm glad I was able to see her a few weeks ago and give her a hug. Well, let's talk about faith before we get into our topics. You and I are both Catholic.
That's 11 years younger than I am. That seems too soon. That seems
too soon. And you are a latecomer to your faith, but you have a very deep and thoughtful faith. What is your position on heaven?
What do you mean I have a very deep and thoughtful faith? I'm on the shadows right now. Okay. I hope it's deep.
Okay, well, what is your perspective on this? Can you give us some wisdom?
On death? I think death is an outrage. Even Jesus wept when he saw it. I think Jesus is the cure for death. I think there is no other cure. Excuse me again. Princess, could you turn that down? I'm recording something. I'm actually live online. Can you turn down the, thank you.
And our prayers, if you read, because
I do have a deep thought about prayer, but it's not original to me. I believe the good Lord waits for us to pray because he wishes us to participate out of love in his great work of granting miracles. And there are things he'll wait for someone to ask in order for someone else to be granted the grace coming toward them. But I don't think he's going to ask, I don't think he's going to wait forever. There's a scene in the book of Esther where she is warned that if she does not help cooperate with God's plan to save the people, that woe be unto her, and he'll find some other way to do it, you see. And I rather like that because as a guy who writes time travel stories, I'm always concerned with how free will and fate work together, or don't work together, as the case may be.
Well,
so
and what do you
think? I do believe that we are as people created in his image and likeness, we are asked to participate in his good work, and we're not meant to stand idle. Now, when I say participate and I stand idle, I include prayer in part of that. I include the contemplative life as being one of the main things that man was set on earth to do. They also serve who only stand awake. I realize a Puritan wrote that, but still, it's still true.
Sure. Well, it's a common Christian thread, right? Now, but you say that prayer is an interesting thing because is there a right way to pray?
There's many wrong ways to pray.
Okay.
But I don't know if there's a right way to pray.
Yeah, because this is a question like, how do you pray? I mean, obviously, there's prayers given by
you ask, because his disciples asked the Lord the same thing, and he gave them a model prayer to follow, where you start with. And I believe Our Lady also told someone, who was it, Saint Dominic? I forget, about this kind of rose garden of prayers that you can pray with a bunch of prayer beads with sort of in a cycle of 50 prayers at a time. So I'm sure the Catholics know all about that kind of thing. Yes, this is
I'm a convert also. I'm learning.
Pray the way our Lord said to pray. That's one of them. I don't have anything wrong with impromptu prayer or meditative prayer or prayers of thanksgiving. I think you should give thanks. I think you should put your petitions before the Lord. I think that you should praise him, and I think that you should ask for forgiveness for your sins. Those are all worthy ways to pray.
Well, and if I could ask my chat to pray for Lord of the Ree and his family, and for the survivors, the people that are left behind who have to deal with a loss, and upon the horizons here. And he's a great man of faith. He is always teaching me and asking great questions. So thank you all. Please do that for Lord of the Ree. And this is the thing. There's not a lot of forums where we can even talk about faith anymore because they want to shut us down anytime we want to observe things that may be faith related. And I know that, we talked a little bit about the YouTube censorship. You're seeing it kind of widespread through society that you can't talk about. It's separation of church and state. And that means church needs to be contained within the church. Well, Christianity is everything you are. It's everything. So to me,
I hate to report it to you, but our major institutions have been captured by the Antichrist. I wish there was a gentler way to say that, and I wish it were not the case, or that there was some worldly explanation for it. But it seems to have moved beyond. Normally, criminals are motivated by stupidity, by greed, or power lust, or some other understandable motive. But when you get the LA Dodgers supporting a group of sodomites who are dressed in drag in order to mock the Catholic Church and giving them awards as heroes, and you're not even allowed to refer to them by their proper pronouns without getting banned by the thought police, you have passed far beyond what George Orwell described in 1984. You are now in the lower third of hell and descending rapidly.
Well, I have a question about that because you have dealt with this institutional leftism that is irrational because it goes against the prophet. Look at what is happening to the great company that used to be Disney. They've lost about $1 billion just in the last year trying to push leftist propaganda on children and perversion on children when nobody wants that for their children, and they keep bombing, yet that leadership of that institution keeps doing it despite the profit disincentives. Can you explain this?
I cannot explain it in any worldly way. That's why I'm convinced it's supernatural in origin. That's why I'm convinced that the old gods have woken up, because Ishtar certainly wanted to have sodomites and homosexuals and cross-dressers serving her as temple prostitutes and male prostitutes. But I can't imagine why Disney would think that was a useful profit-making scheme. They certainly have no interest in telling stories anymore, even as propaganda. I've seen good propaganda films. Alexander Nevsky, which was made in the Stalin days of Russia, is a beautiful film, and it's got a brilliant soundtrack by Prokofiev. Okay, it's good propaganda. It made me want to stop the Germans during World War II.
Right.
You know? But this modern stuff is not. It seems to be ritual behavior to placate what I can only refer to as the old gods. You know, I can't. It doesn't fit into my idea of how human psychology works. So
well,
I have to do something non-human about it.
Well, let's bring up human psychology, because my understanding is that conservatives, which I tend to be on the right, you know,
let me interrupt you one more time, if I may. You also call them leftists. I don't think they are that anymore. I think leftism has been killed and replaced by a doppelganger, by a guy wearing a skin suit like something out of the Men in Black movie. And these guys are no longer leftists, because the leftists, when I was young, believed in freedom of speech. They believed in liberty. They believed in doing what you wanted in the privacy of your own bedroom, not in the middle of the street. Do you see the difference?
Yes. Well, Dennis Prager,
they were not anti-Semites.
Dennis Prager makes that distinction between liberals and leftists. So I'm using the Prager definition that.
Oh, no, I'll accept that. Leftists, if by leftists you mean red, you mean commie, sure.
Right.
These guys are leftists and not liberals. I agree.
Yeah, that's what I'm. That's what
I'm. Dennis Prager. He's a pretty smart man.
Yeah, and he says that the traditional liberals, who are the people that I want to reach out to, who are my natural allies, are pro-free speech, and tend to be determined by the openness, big five personality trait, whereas conscientiousness tends to determine conservatism. Well, you are probably high in openness. I'm pretty high, but I'm extremely.
I'm not familiar with your freaky psychological scheme.
Okay.
I'm not a person. I am an introvert. I am bookish. I am a cruel and a curmudgeonly, and I disapprove of everything. So I don't know why you call that openness. That's not me. I'm not.
Well,
it's left-leaning at all.
It's a fount of creativity, and this is the openness.
I know the left is often claimed to be more creative than the right, but when I read C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien and Milton and Homer and Virgil, I don't see any leftist sentiment. They like to pretend that their stance is that way, but I'm skeptical.
See, this is why I like talking to you, because you're challenging everything I'm saying, and and it's making me really have to go back and rethink and make sure, like, Ghazi, are you sure about what you're saying? And so now I'm going to have.
The problem is I could just be ignorant. I'm not familiar with the psychological theory that you've bought into, because you seem to think of 5 basic personality types.
Right.
Okay, I don't know what that. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know what traits you think those 5 have. I'm not sure what you mean by openness, because you haven't defined your terms. I'm not sure why. I do know why liberals claim to be more creative than conservatives, but I also don't see that as necessarily the case. And I'm also not sure where the boundary lines lie between what we call conservative and what we call liberal.
Okay, well, let's just back up and stay away from the psychological terms and say, for example, musicians. And I'm a big fan of music. Some of the greatest musicians, most of the great musicians, tend to be on the liberal side or on the leftist side. They tend to not be conservative. Now, is that simply institutional shaming and curmudgeonry that which bans those people and does not raise them to our consciousness, or is it simply a matter of creativity?
I have no idea. I don't know what Beethoven's politics were. I don't know what Mozart's politics were. I don't know anything about musicians.
Well, I'm talking about modern.
Not only can I not answer the question, I can't even speculate about the question. Unless you want to talk about the Beatles. I believe the Beatles one of them was a Buddhist or something.
Yes, George Harrison.
They wore their hair long. I would say they were not conservative, at least in their dress.
Well, okay. One of these days we're going to get to our first topic, and that's Muse. Okay, and something that you had said. And oops, can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's fine.
Oh, sorry, I kicked my video monitor out of the thing. Okay, the Muse, and you had said something, and it kind of goes with my theories of humility. And you said, you tend to be, get full of yourself, be an admirer of yourself, and conscious humility is an important quest that I need too, because that can be my failing. And whenever I'm getting too full of myself, I'm on the wrong track. And you said something in our last discussion that the muse is like a channeling of God, and that the work that you do in the books that you write, you attribute to a muse that is divinely inspired. I'd like you to expand some more on that.
Well, I'm not sure I said that.
Explain.
I hope my muse is divinely inspired rather than diabolically inspired, but I'm not really sure. I do try to. I underwent a change of heart when I was younger, and for many a year, I thought my job as a writer was to write entertainment for my readers in return for their money, and I was supposed to give value for value, and that because I'm competing for their reader money, I'm competing for their entertainment dollars. And I have to actually entertain them. I have to live up to the unspoken contract that exists between any writer and any book reader once he opens the book. You know, if on the first page you establish that you're writing a detective story, then by the last page, the not only should the detective have solved the problem, but he has to have solved the mystery fair and square. If you open the book and it's a romance, then by the last page, either the two, the male and female, should be in a clinch, or he should say, "I don't give a damn," and walk away. But I'm not sure if you use bad language like that. But there are some good romance books that end that way. In any case, because I write by inspiration rather than by calculation, it is clear to me when I reread what I've written that there are thoughts and ideas much deeper than I am capable of. Symmetrical little things, symbols, and the use of themes and just three-dimensional characters that is beyond my capacity. So I have to say, I'm getting these ideas from somewhere else. Now, if you're a Freudian, and may God have mercy on your soul if you are, if you're a Freudian, you think there's a thing called the subconscious mind, which is a mind that lives in your mind, but you're not aware of it. Okay, so it's an unaware awareness that's somehow in your awareness. Now, that seems like a contradiction to me, but then again, I'm only a poor, humble philosopher who lives and dies by logic. So you could say that my unconscious mind is the thing putting all these ideas together in a very complicated fashion and doing things smarter than I can do. In which case I would say, well, unless you're a mind reader, you can't tell whether that theory is true or not. So you might as well call it the muse until proven otherwise, because it does seem to be a spirit. Now, so for a long time, I tried to keep my own ideas out of what I was writing. I didn't want to use my writing to preach. People who want to go see a preacher go and see a preacher. They don't go and see an entertainer. They don't go to see a clown to hear a political lecture. Okay. Inevitably, some idea, if you're writing a thriller and there's some politics involved, your own idea of how the world works is going to creep into your story no matter what you do. And there's no reason to be ashamed of that, because you will find other people who agree with you on those points. But the more obvious you are about it, the more readers you will lose. If you're Ayn Rand or Robert Heinlein, you will stop the action and make a speech, perhaps a 40-page speech, to put across your ideas, and you're going to lose every reader who doesn't want to read a speech, who wants to be entertained instead, who wants to read a story. Okay. So that was my theory. And when I before and after I converted, I challenged people. I said, you cannot guess what my religion is. You can't tell whether I'm an atheist or a Christian, because I don't put that in my books. I don't try to tell you what I am. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm trying to entertain you. Okay. You don't need to know what a juggler thinks about the bimetallism question in order to see him throw axes and catch them in the air.
Right.
Okay. But then I got a tear-stained letter from a woman who had read one of my stories in Feasts and Seasons, the book I recommended earlier. It was called Yes, Virginia, There's a Santa Claus. And the story has a kind of a hard theme. It was very difficult for me to write, difficult emotionally for me to write. And she had been helped through a difficult time because of that story. Now, the story was deeper than I'm capable of writing. The same way the guy with the head in the floating head in the jar was scarier than I'm capable of writing in the story you read. You remember you just said earlier that you were terrified by the time traveler's robot? Okay, that wasn't me. That was something that made it scary to you. So if it's not me and it's not you, then it's got to be the muse. It's got to be.
But come on, you wrote that thing to be as terrifying as you could make it.
Sure, but I also know my limitations. So when this woman wrote and said that my story had helped her, and that was a story I wrote that was meant to be, that was Christian apologetics. I meant it to be Christian. It takes place in a Christian background where the Christian metaphysical rules are the rules of the science fictional universe. Okay. I said, why am I hiding this? Why am I not preaching the word of the Lord? Why don't I fear Him first and serve Him first, and then everything else will fall into place. And if He sends an audience, fine. If He doesn't send an audience, such as well. So after that, I became a lot more obvious about how Christian I was, And I even had, in some way, I have my little Catholic boy reciting Catholic prayers while he's trying to control a extra-dimensional substance that's got into his bloodstream that's affected by his thinking. So when he prays and he's in a certain state of mind, supernatural effects happen around him. Maybe it's the prayers, maybe not. But there is an angel buried under the tower he's trapped in. So,
Right.
Yeah, that takes place in an obviously Christian background.
Yeah, well, and you had said that when you wrote the first Orphans of Chaos book that you were not at that point Christian. Is that correct?
Some of it's written by Christian and some of it is not. And I challenge you to find out where the dividing line is.
Well,
by the way, it's not at the spot where you see, I wrote that before. I wrote that, then I converted, then the book came out, because it takes a year or two for the publisher to go through the process. And when I converted, someone asked me in an interview what my religion was, and I didn't want to broadcast it. It's none of his business, but I didn't want to lie about it either, because my master told me that if I denied him in front of men, he was going to deny me in front of God. So I said I was Christian, and he said, "Well, how did you come to be Christian?" And I told him the whole story. And so leftist reviewers who have a allergic reaction to Christ, an allergic reaction to reality, said, "Oh, this book is Christian apologetics." And I was like, can't you read the scene where the one character is blaspheming the Lord right in front of everyone? Are you out of your mind?
Well, no, we had talked.
He could not see it because the church bells drove back the witch's magic powers in Orphan of Chaos, which I got straight from fairy tales. I got that from what I was copying from. I didn't make that up.
Well, and I didn't detect it because we had talked before I'd finished that series, and I didn't detect any overtness necessarily. But the one interesting, and there's these great little creative, and maybe we all share, we can't read everything, and so you're coming at it from your own worldview. But the idea that there's like a trade, there's an ethical compromise that makes you obligated, and that was the whole way that these people were enslaved, was by this ethical trade, so to speak. Like when there was a
that was only the viewpoint character's viewpoint of how things operated on the moral level of the universe. She was a four-dimensional being, so she could see dimensions beyond ours.
Right.
And I thought it would be interesting to say that the other dimensions included things like the music dimension and the morality dimension and the artistic dimension, other dimensions that play into our world but aren't visible to us. So she based her thinking on reciprocity. Right. I got her worldview basically from A. Van Vogt, and I kind of blended it together in a science fiction background.
Pretty neat.
Brandon has a question here for me. I don't know if you can see it also.
Yes,
I'm passive versus active recall if you don't have some element of subconscious. I don't understand the question. I don't know what passive versus active recall is.
Let's go, Brandon. Can you clarify your question for our author? Okay,
Keep in mind that I don't study psychology. I don't use those terms. I don't believe in it. I'm psychologically incapable of believing in psychology for the same reason that in all my previous lives, I did not believe in reincarnation then, and I don't believe in it now.
You see there, I see what you're doing there. You see there, I caught that. All right, so going back to the Muse, and you had a.
I believe the Muse is the simplest explanation given the facts, and Occam's razor requires that I use a model that does not multiply entities unnecessarily. So instead of believing in a subconscious mind, a conscious unconsciousness that is able to do creative thinking faster and better than I can do it, I prefer that there's a Greek goddess who does it, because that makes more sense to me.
Well, upon the horizon comments, allergic reaction to reality. Well said.
I should be a writer if I can.
Yeah, you should write this stuff down. So okay, but going back to the Muse anxiety, and I'm interested because I'm trying to explain because I'm kind of writing things. I write things when people say, well, why are you writing that? Because the muse is there. And you said something that really resonated with me, and that was that you have to honor the muse. And so when the muse strikes, you need to honor her by capturing that idea and working out the muse as it draws you towards it.
I didn't exactly say that. You get a lot of things out of my words that I don't put into it.
Well,
I believe what I said was that when the muse strikes, you have to be honest with her and not put your own ideas into what she's being presented. And that sometimes takes courage. And when I say courage, I don't mean real courage like a soldier has. I mean fake courage like a poet has, where you have to actually bite the bullet and expose yourself to public humiliation by speaking the internal truth that the muse has presented to you. You see, and sometimes it's embarrassing, and sometimes it's bad, and sometimes you will lose readers. But it's you have to be true to yourself, and well, it's true to God. But God first. When I say true to yourself, I don't mean yourself. I mean the muse. I mean something external to yourself, putting yourself aside in order to do it.
Well, and you're hitting on
another. If I used a modern metaphor for something that the moderns don't understand. By the way, before your friend Let's Go Brandon gets too involved, I do think that the human mind is complicated, and there are many spirits that live inside you, and there's things you're unaware of that occur in the back of your mind. I do think that dreams come from somewhere, So there. I mean, I'm not claiming that humans are like some sort of computer that's aware of every part of its own internal processes, which I don't think computers are anyway. So, I'm sure there's something there. I just don't think Freud. I think Freud was making it up.
Well, see, I'm not a big fan of Freud. I am a big fan of Jung. So I'm a little different. I always say that Jung is for the normal people. Freud's for the abnormal people.
Jung is a bit of a magician in my thinking, but I haven't read him, so I'm not gonna venture an opinion beyond a slight raised eyebrow.
Well, and you also said about truth, and that you're trying to speak truth. Now, as a fiction writer, how does the truth unfold on the pages of a fiction novel? How do you?
The whole point of fiction. The whole point of fiction is to say a truth you can't. If you said it literally, you lose the point. Okay. I've also written for newspapers. I know how to write literal sentences that explain literally what the facts are without saying what the reality is. Okay, but the facts are the surface features. The reality is the heart. You can't put the heart on the surface because it's not a surface feature. Okay, facts deal with things that you can measure and you can see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reality deals with what gives rise to those things, right?
Okay.
Human reality is complex because we kind of defy the law of cause and effect by having free will. And we know the good and don't do the good. There's an internal conflict, an internal war between the let's call it the Cain spirit and the Abel spirit, which lives in our hearts of every man. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That makes the human condition complex and puzzling, wrapped around in paradoxes, and reality is crazy. We live in a reality where an omnipotent, omniscient, unmoved mover, perfect God and supreme being turned into a Jewish baby and was sitting in a stinking stable. How can you even picture that in your head? How can you even say, oh yeah, that makes sense? How can we know the good and not do the good? How come we're not all like Vulcans? Why are we like Mr. Spock, who has a human half that tears him in two? I believe that the Eden story is a correct story, even if a scientist says it's not factually true. Even if we get a time machine, we go back to 6006 BC, and lo and behold, the first man was made from an ape rather than from the dirt. That would be fine with me because the ape came from, earlier from a rat, which came from a microbe, which came from the dirt. So it's the same thing either way.
Right. Well, and
I'm not a bit of a literalist because I think there are truths that are non-literal truths that you can say, that you can sum up in a poem better than you can sum up in a scientific dissertation. Well, I believe in fact science is nothing but poetry, but it's extremely literal and very boring poetry.
But and I'm going to use this analogy of the Marvel movies that we're seeing, and that they're cardboard characters. My son and I were having this discussion just the other day about like why I resent watching some of these movies that are on and why they're bad, and that is that these characters are not true.
Because
What's that?
I hope you mean the modern ones because the older ones were quite good.
No, I'm talking about the newer ones. And it's because the characters are cardboard and are not believable.
Not
They're
even
not
cardboard.
true.
You're giving them too much credit. A cardboard character is a character put together by an inefficient, inexpert writer who's trying to get a character that has only one personality trait on screen. Okay? These are propaganda techniques where the person represents a race or a sex or a sexual malfunction. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So when they try to portray a person, they're merely holding up a puppet that they're trying to write allegory, like Pilgrim's Progress, but it's false allegory. So the characters can't even have true human emotions. The characters all have the wrong emotion because these people have a wrong worldview. Back in the old days, the liberals, the real liberals, could have some things wrong and some things right about their worldview. But as time went on, and for reasons that, again, I think are supernatural rather than natural, for reasons I can't really explain, they found they had to give up more and more of Christianity to give up the part of Christianity they don't want. Basically, in the 60s, they wanted to keep Christianity but get rid of the sexual mores. Mm-hmm. Okay, they wanted to keep Christianity, but they wanted to also be intoxicated with drugs. They wanted to keep the basic idea of helping the poor and the basic idea of human beings having dignity, but just get rid of some of the parts they didn't like. Well, the problem is philosophy has a logic to it. Theology has a logic to it. It's in the name, theologos, the logic of God. So once you start getting rid of one idea after another, once you say that morality is a human construct. If you're Freud, you say morality is invented by society and used to control people. It's that your conscience is not the voice of God in your soul. The conscience is merely the habituation to social conditioning. Well, once you start saying that, what is not social conditioning? I mean, the rules of grammar, I would say, were socially based, but what about the sexual roles? Are they socially based or are they based on reality? Once you say the sexual roles are not based on reality, what about the sexes? You see, once you say that reality is not based on reality, then where are you? That's where we are now. We have reached the nihilistic endpoint, the black hole, the event horizon. We've reached a point where logic itself is no longer of any value to these people. They regard logic as a trick. They regard logic as a oppression used by the demiurge, used by the capitalists, used by the Jews, used by the patriarchy, or fill in the blank, used by the oppressor class to oppress the oppressed class. And they use
this is formula, the Marxist.
They use the same formula of oppressor versus oppressed
right.
to criticize and do everything. Well, you can't tell a story in that background. If there's nothing but oppressors and oppressed, there's no heroes. Okay, because the hero is not helpless, and the oppressed have to be helpless at every turn.
See, and you're moving into the.
You can't have a superhero. You see, you can't have a guy who strives and does better because that indicates he's responsible for his own actions. And you can't have responsibility in a world where there's no God, there's no conscience, there's no cause and effect, there's no free will, there's no nothing.
It's just it's puppetry, and it's not believable because it's not true. And this is my criticism of so many modern things. It's just
you've answered the question of how fiction can be true or not true. Their fiction is not true, therefore it barely is even fiction. It's propaganda, but it's not even good propaganda. It's just ritual. It's just ritual recitation of their credo, their Antichrist creed. And again, I don't want to sound like a religious fanatic, but my sense of logic gives me no other option.
No, I'm with you. Okay, well, let's go. Brandon has a couple questions, and he says, you can absorb information actively. Say I want to remember you're wearing a red sweater, but I might also passively, unintentionally notice or absorb that Steve is wearing a jacket. Adorably.
I don't see how that relates to the idea of a subconscious mind.
And then he says, how would you juxtapose that with conscious versus the lack of subconscious? I don't think there's an inherent conflict.
There are things that pass into and come out of your awareness. Where they go after I'm unaware of them, I'm unaware. I mean, we can assume there's a land where thoughts go to die or where memories rest when they're not being used. I imagine like a little library in the back of my mind, but it's very dusty. And I'll send a servant boy in my head to walk down my spine and go get a book, and then I'll misplace it. And I'll bring him something else entirely, And by the way, that's from the Fairy Queen. I didn't make that one up. Don't get me wrong. I do believe there are things you're unaware of. I don't think man is omniscient by any means. I just don't think that giving it a name tells you what it is. things come into my awareness from outside my awareness. That happens. Okay. Things pass out of my awareness, especially things my wife tells me, that come back into my awareness when it's too late. And sometimes I find that I'm in a timeline, but it's not the timeline everyone else is in, because I remember events differently than everyone else in the room around me. And we call this crossing in the mist, because the two timelines sometimes overlap and blend. I think it's a scientifically explainable phenomenon. But to ascribe to my subconscious mind things that are much more easily described by saying it's spirits, it's a nightmare, it's an influence, it's I know not what it is, I prefer to be a little more non-modern in admitting my ignorance of what's going on.
Oh, and
I think psychology gives people a feeling that they know what's going on when they don't.
Yeah.
I think
well, and
people according to personality types is astrology.
Well, you're making a point about
astrology.
You're making also. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was making the same bad joke I made before. As a Libra, I don't believe in astrology. I believe that astrologers classify everyone to 12 personality types based on when they were born. I also believe there's nothing wrong with saying what the guy's blood humerus is to make him either sanguine or choleric or melancholic or colic. I do believe there are melancholy people. I do believe there are sanguine people.
But you said when we began this, you said you're quite introverted. And that's one of the big 5 personality types.
Yes, because I was born as a Libra. Libras are introverted. That's the rule of the stars.
Well, upon the horizon,
psychology, it's because psychic influences came down from the ancient Babylonian gods that exist in the spherical, the crystal spheres that surround the Earth, and that changed my spirit.
See, now you're just being an obstinate Libra. So let me say, I've got
that comes. I'm sorry, that comes from my genetics, not from my astrology.
Oh, okay.
That's the obstinacy gene.
Oh, hey, King Bob.
If you believe in genetics.
Yeah, King Bob says, my sister got her books. Thank you. Good to see you. And Glitter is also in the chat. Good to see you, Glitter. And P. Willie Truth says, here's P. Willie Truth. And I want to tell you about Upon the Horizon, who is a bit of a Christian philosopher or thinker. And he has a series of comments over in Rumble. And I want to read them and get your reaction, because he's always thinking much more religiously than I. So here it is. Well, and before we do that,
my reactions always tend to be negative, no matter what it is. I'm just against it.
Let's Go Brandon.
I'm against it.
You don't know who Let's Go Brandon is, do you?
I don't know who his real name. I assume his mother did not name him Brandon. I assume Mrs. Brandon didn't name him Let's Go. I assume that's a reference to the famous moment when by the way, I used to be a newspaper man too, when the famous newspaper reporter was interviewing the winner of a car race. And the crowd was all chanting, let us say, an Anglo-Saxon political slogan referring to the basic spirit of the country, and proof once again that he did not win anything honestly, that the election was fixed. Okay, you're going to be off YouTube if I say that. Yes, I know what the phrase means. I don't know who the person is. I just know he's a kindred spirit.
Well, no, he is actually a big benefactor and has supported my book production quite a bit, and I always thank Mr. Brandon. But he is known; he's a legend amongst us law tubers, and he's the guy that buys drinks for law tubers for large amounts of money, and he likes to get law tubers drunk under the table. Although he's never done that quite for me. Although I think it might have been Brandon that had me.
Are you boasting about getting drunk? That seems really odd to me.
It was odd. Well, because he's bribing me to do it. You see, that's his
enjoyment. Boasting about your weakness of character or your poverty? Once again, that seems just bizarre.
Yeah, I know it's bizarre. But anyway, just trust
me. Get drunk. I'm sorry. My wife is upbraiding me for making fun of my host. Yes, you did get drunk.
He's one of my supporters. He has helped me produce my books, and I really thank him for that. And he's a big friend.
As an ex-bartender, I do admire any man who can hold his liquor.
Right? Yes. Well, I can't. I'm a lightweight. I'm a girly drinker. I can't drink. He knows this too. See, he knows that I can't handle too much alcohol. I'm very lightweight.
Now, if he's trying to man you up, I have to approve of that. There's far too little manhood in the world.
Oh, okay. So now you're turning on me. You're turning on me. I'm getting surrounded.
You didn't hear my whole sentence. I said including with men. I wish I was more of a leader in my household. When my wife would not be so uppity. She talks back to me and sometimes rebukes me and reminds me of the chores I promised to do. And is that her job? Why behind every great man is there a woman shoving him back into work? By the way, I'm supposed to be drawing an illustration for her right now, and I'm not doing it because I'm talking to you. So you owe her. Yeah.
I hear a laughter. Wait a second.
My illustrations show up in her books, The Unexpected Enlightenment of Rachel Griffin, which is a story about a science fiction world where all trace of Christianity has been removed by an eerie supernatural spell. And the little girl, the little witch, is going to a magic school and finding out that there's a deeper magic than the magic from the dawn of time. So it's worth reading.
Well, he's a man.
Both little girls and grown men like the book.
Yes. Well, let's I want to get over. I really do want to bring this to your attention, because Upon the Horizon is a much more studied Christian than I. Us Catholics, the Bible is a suggestion, not a requirement. So he actually studies this stuff. So let me see. That's the cradle Catholics. Paul in Romans chapter 6-7 made the distinction between the carnal man and being led by the Spirit regarding man's struggle with sinful nature. Paul said, "O wretched man that I am, who will save me from this body of sin and death? I thank God that there is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, who walk according to the Spirit and not the flesh." Response?
Twice 2 is 4. Yes, what he's saying is obviously true.
Yes, and Paul. Now, what is your insight or your impression that we live in a Pauline church? That's what a lot of times.
What?
A Pauline, Paul, the Apostle Paul, kind of developed the modern view of Christianity, and that some critics of modern Christianity say that Paul was an interloper and did not properly interpret the Christian or the Christ message.
Did Paul ever heal the sick and raise the dead?
Did Paul say again? I'm sorry, repeat that.
Did Paul ever heal the sick or raise the dead?
Don't believe so.
You don't? Didn't people used to dip napkins in his that he blessed, or just put the sick out so when his shadow fell on them?
I don't know. See, this is the thing. Jesus did these things.
Did he heal Eutyche?
Say again. I'm sorry.
Did Paul heal Eutyche when he died? Fell to his death out of a window. Or am I confusing it with Peter?
I don't know. The wife is chiming in. What's the wife say? I defer.
The wife is confirming my faulty memory.
Okay.
Yeah. If he healed the sick and raised the dead, can a man do this without God?
No.
Then he's from God.
Yes.
Okay. Problem solved.
Yes. And Vito, you're Veritas. You're not correct. Paul wrote many books. The Old Testament? I don't think so. The Old Testament was based on the Septuagint, which was the Greek Septuagint. I always
Septuagint. Greek for 70.
Well, explain the Old Testament was the Jewish Torah plus that was referred to it was used by the teacher, the rabbi, in explaining the new revelation, the New Testament, the new covenant with God. So the Old Testament, Paul was post Jesus and was right? Wouldn't you say?
Post Jesus.
Well, he was, huh?
Post Jesus. He met Christ on the road to Damascus.
Yes, I get it. Well, I can't get away with anything with you. You're right. You're right. Okay, but Jesus is with us now. It's like he is risen, not he as. But he wasn't an original apostle, as in the original 12 apostles.
He was not one of the original 12. No.
Okay, well that's what
that's true. Therefore, what?
Well, I'm just talking here. I'm getting your impressions.
Okay. I'm not seeing where the talking is going.
Okay, well, I'm getting you to reflect on Upon the Horizon, because he's talking above my head on religious topics, because I'm just a follower and a sheep.
I'm a recent convert. There's very much I do not know. So
okay, same here.
You're not going to get much. You can't get a deep echo from a shallow well, I'm afraid.
All right, well, let's move on then, because you had another topic that I really wanted to talk to you about, and I want to get to it, and we can entertain with the chat beyond that. And if I'm off on a tangent, it won't interfere with my next question.
In case your viewers don't know, I'm a faithful Catholic. I believe everything the church teaches.
Yes, well, I do too, but I don't know everything the church teaches. I'm
No,
just
who
a
does?
student. Yes, who does?
It's 2,000 years old plus. There's all sorts of books written, and many of them are written in Latin and other dead languages. So, excuse me, it's not technically not a dead language because I believe it is the national language of the Vatican City, which is a sovereign state.
Oh, I didn't know that either. See, I'm learning all the time.
As a failed lawyer, I happen to know that it's required by law for the State Department to translate documents given to a sovereign entity, another state, in their native language. And the official language of the Vatican City is Latin, so they have to have the documents translated into Latin when they send something to the ambassador who lives there.
Well, see, and I'm gonna lean again on Upon the Horizon, who says Paul is an apostle because he personally experienced Jesus. Paul was sent to the Gentiles. The gospel was to the Jews first, and then to the Gentiles. Okay, fair enough. And let's go. Brandon says, John.
I'm puzzled. I don't see that was in dispute, and I don't see that was related to the first question.
No, we're just talking. But let's go.
Here's the thing: this context you even set in. You said there are people who criticize the Catholics for that Christianity was an invention of Paul's that he made up out of his own head.
No, right? No, that's not quite. I'm saying that the Pauline interpretation is the modern Christian church. That Paul grafted many of the ideas on how we should view Jesus's coming to earth through a Pauline lens. And he was the author of many of the New Testament letters. So obviously his interpretations, but is it Paul or is that just the discussions from the early church? I'm not certain. I was just positing a criticism that
there are similar debates surrounding the authorship of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I believe that the Iliad and the Odyssey were written by a man named Homer, or if not, they were written by another man named Homer, who lived later.
Okay.
I also believe that Shakespeare wrote almost all of Shakespeare's plays. The one that's written by Shakespeare, that is.
Right. Well, and there's an example of somebody who writes truth, even though it's fiction, because Shakespeare is striking on themes that are common to all of humanity and are resonating even with today's secular.
I noticed that Hamlet's father is in purgatory, which is a Catholic doctrine that Queen Elizabeth and her ilk rejected. So I think he's sneaking some of the Catholic worldview into his play.
That's interesting. I just reread Inferno, actually, and that's such a great book.
Inferno, well, okay. Dante's Inferno?
Yes.
Okay, Dante was a different person from Shakespeare.
Well, yes, I do.
He was Italian. He spoke he made gestures when he spoke, and Shakespeare, as an Englishman, did not make gestures when he speaks.
Okay, yeah, all right. See, people are really enjoying listening to somebody give me a hard time, I must say. And so,
I bring the light of enlightenment here. Dante is still one of my favorite poets, and it's kind of funny because he was my favorite when I was an atheist too. I did like Milton, but then again, Milton strikes me as being a little more romantic, and Dante's a little more structured, a little more like a cathedral.
See, this I feel like I'm in an oral argument, and I don't have my act together. So, Your Honor, and then I have to shut up when you start talking, and you ask this question. You're challenging everything I'm saying.
I haven't asked you a single question. I know, but I did ask you whether or not Paul cured the sick and raised the dead. And the answer to that is yes. And the answer to that is therefore he was a prophet of God, because otherwise he can't do these things.
Okay, well, see, again, I'm not prepared for this. Your Honor, can I brief that later?
Yeah, I don't believe in reincarnation, but if I did, I would be the reincarnation of Paul, because I used to breathe hatred toward the Christians, and I was out to destroy them to the best of my ability. And then I got hit with a lightning bolt of enlightenment and clapped over the head by the 2x4 of truth and smashed through the plate glass window of faith, and here I am. So I'm just as fanatical a Christian as I was fanatical an atheist, because my personality hasn't changed. just my orientation. I'm now for the good instead of against.
Right. Well, so Paul is a model.
Yes, Paul is a very close model, but I model my body shape and type after G.K. Chesterton.
Oh, yes.
Was rotund in many ways. Someone asked for my opinion on The Chosen. My opinion is the highest possible opinion. I think The Chosen is one of the few times I've ever seen Christ portrayed in fiction legitimately and honestly. And I really like the fact that the disciples don't know what's going on, and they kind of have to figure it out as they're going. As a Catholic, I would have liked to see more of the Virgin Mary. That's just me. That's just, Catholics like the Virgin Mary. they are walking in a minefield. It's really hard to do the greatest story ever told without offending people's most deeply held convictions. And I think they thread that needle rather nicely.
Okay.
I have great admiration for the series. If I had to pick nits, I bet I could find one or two to pick, but they don't contradict anything in the Bible, but they do take some liberties as to let's say what kind of man Peter is. Okay, they give him a personality which is feasible that he was that way. Okay, and the reason why I'm grinning is because I've also written stories based on historical characters where I had to make up what's not in the history book. And you can do it well and you can do it badly. And these guys do it well. So Peter's actually the kind of guy, when we first meet him, spoilers, he's in a fixed bare knuckle brawl trying to win gambling money from a chump because he didn't get enough in fish to pay the Roman taxes, and they're going to take his house if they doesn't. So he has to sneak out on the Sabbath to do the fishing when the guards aren't watching, because the Romans don't watch the lake for fishermen at night on the Sabbath because they know that the Jews don't work on the Sabbath. And there he is breaking the law anyway, and the religious law, and the Roman law. And so when he meets the Christ, he goes, "Get away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." And I thought, that guy, I don't know if the real Peter was that way at all. He might have been the opposite. But that character, those words were legitimate coming out of his mouth because he was terrible. He was a sinful man. But he loved his wife, so, more power to him.
Well,
I also love the way they portray the Roman procurator as this amused, sarcastic, sardonic, wicked man who's just trying to keep a lid on the unruly population of the conquered people that he has to keep under the boot of Rome. I kind of sympathize with him, but not too much. Perfect portrayals. But
what have the Romans ever done for us?
Well, except for the aqueduct and the Roman law,
Right. Yeah. Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you.
By the way, just don't get me wrong. The Romans were terrible people. Gladiatorial games, okay? If you couldn't go to a zoo to see an elephant, you had to go watch it trample some fighting slave in the circus if you wanted to see it. And I do think that Rome is the highest human beings can reach without Christianity. I do think that they're the noblest and best, and that they were also just almost demonic in how sadistic they were. Okay, but beautiful statues, great architecture, honest laws. They were better than the Carthaginians. So what can I say? Roads, brilliant roads. Roads you could not make roads these days that good. So.
Well, they were quite the road builders. And I want to first of all thank your wife for loaning you to me. And I'm going to try to get this other topic in because it's another thing that's been rattling. And I'm going to have to rewatch this to catch everything you're saying because I'm juggling chats and doing all this. And so I'm going to have to rewatch it to make sure.
I'll also speak in Pig Latin to make it more difficult.
Yes, you can reverse. Right. You'll do it out of order, like 5, and then you're saying, I actually was making a lot of sense, but I scrambled the chapters so that it made it more confusing, like this book here. But I'll tell you almost lost me on that chapter. But once I understood what you're doing, I said, okay, I'm going to see it through. And it was very satisfying in the conclusion. So
some of my writing is more opaque and some is less opaque. The Golden Age, I'm afraid to say, is pretty opaque. Orphans of Chaos is less opaque until the main character starts talking about the fourth dimension, and then you're lost. Counter Trillion is really straightforward comparatively.
Okay, good. I want straightforward. See, this is
until you get to the far future, in which case you'll be totally lost.
So, I need simple.
Counter Trillion is based on is based in spirit, but not in truth, on a Japanese anime called Gurren Lagann, where in Gurren Lagann the problems get asymptotically larger and larger as the series goes on, until in the first episodes there's a guy living in an underground cave who's trying to get free to the surface. In the last episode, the bad guys are throwing galaxies at each other like shuriken in their mecha that are multiple hundreds of light years tall. So the scale is like the Lensman series from Doc E. Smith in Counter Trillion. That Counter Trillion is my homage to Doc Smith.
So. Okay, well, and I actually have another book which I should have pulled here that my son wants to read that I gave up on because I didn't watch the movie, and that's called The Last Straw. And this is your criticism of the Star Wars The Last Jedi. And it is, I started to read it. I read through it to the point that it was hilarious. And then you started getting into details of the movie. But the fact that I hadn't watched the movie was a barrier to entry on that book. But
do not watch the movie. Your life is better without it.
and I gave
you could spend 2 hours banging your head against a brick wall and get more pleasure from that than watching that horrible movie.
It was very clear of your opinion on this movie, but I gave up on Star Wars quite a few movies before that. So I had not watched it up to that point, nor do I choose to begin watching. But The Last Straw was a book you wrote as a Star Wars fan in reaction to The Last Jedi. Could you summarize that for our chat? Because we have a lot of Star Wars fans.
I could summarize it by sticking my finger down my throat and inducing vomiting, but I don't want to do that on camera. It is my belief that The Last Straw represented a philosophy diametrically opposed to everything good, wholesome, decent, beautiful, and nice in life, and I'm sorry.
You said The Last Straw.
I meant my wife is correcting me. I said The Last Straw was opposed to everything good in life. No, The Last Straw is my criticism of The Last Jedi, and The Last Jedi was the last straw for me. That's the last dollar these guys are ever going to get out of me. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I wish it was just something as simple as incompetence that made this movie so bad. I believe it was motivated by a deep-seated dislike of the fans and what we stand for. Someone who hated the idea of space opera, hated heroism, hated the idea of lighthearted good fun, and thought he's just better than us and that we're stupid for giving him money. Mm-hmm. But I saw it for free, so I didn't give him any money. Now, I did watch part of it in Spanish because the dialogue was so bad. I didn't want to hear what was going on. So there's that. But it was maybe the worst movie I ever saw, but only because I'm such a big Star Wars fan. Star Wars is one of the best movies I ever saw. I mean, the real Star Wars, the one you young whippersnappers now call A New Hope, which we are not allowed to say in my house.
Well, the thing
in my
about
house, you have to call that movie Star Wars because that's what it was when it was in theater.
Well, and the first three were excellent, but it really is a matter of almost spiteful hatred towards the fan base.
I would not say almost.
Okay, yes, I'm a lawyer. I have to qualify everything, but yes, it's been quite a depressing, but it is a non-fiction.
You're a successful lawyer, and I'm a failure at it. So,
well, now here's my question on that book, because it's kind of like when I wrote Death Penalty Debates, it kind of just came out because I kept getting asked the question about my stance on the death penalty, and it's like because I work in death penalty and appeals and I've been involved in this stuff, right? And I'm so it's like, okay, here's what I have to say about it. Here's my framework for answering the question. And I kind of wrote it out. I structured it and wrote it straight out. And then, and I kind of felt like that's what you did with The Last Straw, that you were so frustrated that you hit the computer and wrote and ranted until you couldn't stop it. And it became a book. Is that the way that came out, or how did that?
Not at all. It was, what happened is after we came back from another movie, I forget what it was.
Look at this here.
Yeah, Hotel.
You're right. We were at a hotel. I watched it when I was staying overnight at a hotel, and it was so bad that, as I said, I turned off the soundtrack for part of it, and it was an insult to everything Star Wars stood for. So I sat down and I wrote a series of blog posts. Now I have to admit, originally I meant to write one blog post, and I realized at the end of 2,000 words that I had only covered everything that was bad in the opening word crawl. The opening word crawl was that bad. Okay. Then I spent another post talking about how bad the soundtrack was, the music was, even though it was John Williams music, and they were just misusing it atrociously. Okay. So at that point, I decided to analyze it using my writer's skills to say how you would write it correctly if you were going to write it correctly. And I hope you at least got to the point where I talked about Death Pilot XK-101, who was the guy who was going to kill the Princess Leia, but instead, or rather, excuse me, belay that. I believe Emo Vader was going to kill her, and even as his black-clad evil finger of evil was pushing toward the mother-killing button, someone else shot the missiles in instead. And I wrote an entire paragraph or two about that guy's life to show what I would have done if I'd done the movie differently. And that guy was a lot more interesting because one of his sons was going to Sith Academy and learning how to be an evil Dark Lord. And Another son was going into the Marines and becoming a stormtrooper, just like his good old dad, and so on and so forth. So, and he had kind of a stormy relationship with his wife Venema, because she was a femme fatale who tried to stab him once. But in any case, I hope you at least got to that part.
Well, I will say. Let me just read. I want to read one
sure
paragraph chapter.
Did I answer your question? No, I wrote the last draft rather deliberately.
Okay.
I just waxed emotional, unlike my normal Vulcan calm self, because I was personally offended because the filmmaker, whose name I can't remember, was it Ryan? Came over to my house when I was asleep and slapped me across the face over and over again with a limp fish. And
I know, I was there.
My son was there. He will testify for me.
Okay. Well, here I thoroughly confused. Brandon is confused. Well, he is critiquing The Last Jedi in a book called The Last Straw. And this chapter, I love this end. I think it's he says, this is John Wright talking here. This flick is so bad. Each scene, practically each line, is such a studied insult and a waggling figure to the loyal fans, delivered with such incompetent condescension by the filmmaker, that a series of articles, or perhaps the rest of my natural life, might be required to do it justice. That's so great.
Someone did a rather nice audiobook of it, but the one thing that was a mistake on my part is I didn't tell him the tune to which the Imperial Stormtroopers of the First Order are supposed to be singing at the very end. And because this is live, I will now usher up my rendition.
Just stay in, you need it.
He's sick in bed.
Oh, never mind.
You're gonna get a sick man out of bed for a joke?
Come on, Gus, you need it.
My son is now required by my wife.
Yeah, he's gonna sing the Empire song. I'm doing.
Unless he's in his pajamas. I have the camera on here.
Can you come or not, sweetie?
She can come on. Can she come on? Is she camera shy, or can she come say hello to
the wife?
Yeah, the wife.
The wife is busy doing editing work.
Go sing. You're gonna sing that.
You can come sing.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember the tune that we made up for the Imperial song? Okay, ready?
Okay.
I forget the words. Hail, hail the Empire! We will rule the stars. Our leaders are incompetent, but theirs are worse than ours. That's the song.
This is freaking great. Thank you.
I'll remind you that in that
that was
movie,
pretty
the
good.
leaders of the First Order are chasing a starship and not stopping anyone when they get off the starship and go to the casino planet, and not stopping anyone when they get off, and not doing anything, not going ahead of not radioing ahead to cut them off. And they're so ridiculously incompetent that the only thing that saves them from total defeat is the fact that the resistance holes up in a mountain with no escape exits and manages to get so many people killed off that the entire resistance can fit into one cruiser class.
Oh, right. I remember. See, I didn't watch it, but I read your book.
Do not watch it.
And I am of the opinion that the Jedi are not worthy of ruling the Empire. That they are actually the villains.
The Jedi don't rule the Empire. They never did.
Yes, well, this is my point. They don't deserve it. Remember when they all sit around?
They never did. They were knights. They were servants of them.
No, but remember when they were Yoda and all those weird looking characters were sitting around in the circle and prequels? Huh?
Yoda was not a senator. That was a religious order. He was a bishop.
I know, but they were all plotting the maintenance of the world, right? They were all sitting around in this room, ruling the world or whatever it was.
They were not the ruling class. They were the priesthood.
Who was remember when they were fighting in the Phantom Menace, and they were supposed to be in charge, weren't they? Weren't the Jedi in charge?
No, the Chancellor was in charge. The Senate's in charge.
I don't know. It's Star Wars, come on. and then Yoda
gets the difference between a political leader and a religious leader, and you call yourself a Catholic?
Well, yes. Yes. Okay. Well, but Yoda, he gets defeated on the battlefield, one battle, and then he goes flying off and says, I must go into exile. I mean, what was that? One battle you lose, you give up on the world? What was that about?
That was George Lucas trying to cram a prequel into an already established trilogy that he didn't have permission from his ex-wife to use some of the ideas they had worked on. So he decided to make the fall of the empire be something that happened in an afternoon rather than several hundred years. I've changed that, by the way. I'm writing a series now, a 12-book series called Star Quest, which is my version of what I would have done if they had given the sequels to me to write. It was based on a blog post where I just pretended to have watched a different movie than the one that exists in this timeline. It was actually good, and I described what I would have said and what I would have done to make the story interesting. And I was persuaded to actually write it up as a real novel or trilogy of novels. And like all my trilogies, it expanded to beyond its natural length.
Well, here's another question. As a Star Wars fan who's actually defending prequel chronologies, here when they're on this battlefield and they've got all this artillery lined up, I don't know, whatever the parties were, they were fighting in this incompetent.
That's the problem with the prequels. Whatever the parties were is right.
Yes,
he did not. Lucas does not know why empires fall. He doesn't know how to portray corruption, and you certainly can't do that as a Buck Rogers story. He was trying to do Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire as a Buck Rogers story, and you can't do it.
I don't think
maybe genius can do it, but he can't.
The prequels, I don't think he cared one whit about anything except making money of the prequels. And he just slapped it together. And there's a really good.
Keep in mind that Lawrence Kasdan and who's the girl who wrote Northwest Smith? Leigh Brackett of science fiction pulp fame, the woman who wrote the Northwest Smith space opera stories, also wrote, I believe it was The Big Sleep, unless I'm confusing that with The Maltese Falcon. She wrote The Big Sleep, so she was both a screenwriter for Hollywood of some famous films and a pulp writer for the magazines. So when Lucas called her up for the second movie, he asked her to write, and she assumed that she had heard of her. Leigh Brackett assumed that she'd heard of that the film producer had heard of her work on The Big Sleep, a rather famous Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall film. Okay. Maybe one of the most famous film noir detective story films of all time. And he said, no, I got your name from off of a pulp magazine, you see. Now, she and Lawrence Kasdan are the ones that made that film, The Empire Strikes Back, brilliant, you see. And other people, it is unfortunate that Lucas had complete control over the prequels because he had to work with a lot of other people who basically the editing and the writing saved his otherwise mediocre storyline and made it into something brilliant. He captured lightning in a bottle. Okay. Mm-hmm. Part of it, by the way, was because he was copying from the model of the 1940s and also copying over elements that he didn't know what they were. He himself is a liberal, but he was copying. If you're copying Buck Rogers from 1940s, you're going to get World War II sentiment, pre-World War II American sentiment in your tale. So the prequels I think were bad. Until I saw the Disney prequels. Now they look good by contrast.
Right.
In the same way that scalding your tongue on hot tea is unpleasant, being thrown in boiling oil is worse. But both of them are mere pikers compared to being shot into the core of a sun.
Okay, well, my point,
I'm not going to defend the prequels. I think they are subpar. I think they're mediocre. Okay. Except for Glendy Tartovsky's animated short versions. I think he did a good job. But the prequels made the stormtroopers into the good guys. No American is supposed to use the word stormtrooper for anything but guys who are so evil that no other word will apply.
Well, what I was going to say though, Nud, is that when these two parties were battling on this battlefield, and the Empire people, there was a big shield, and the Empire had this artillery, and they blasted away at the shield, right?
Which movie is this?
I don't know. It's one of the prequels. I don't want to watch.
There was no Empire in the prequels.
Huh?
The Empire didn't exist in the prequels.
Well, it was whatever. Chat, help me out here. Well, if you guys are prequel nerds, tell me.
You can just say bad guys. You can just say the bad guys.
The bad guys were blasted away with artillery. They blast away the little shield, right, dome, and then when the dome goes down, they send in the stupid robots that get to like wipe them out. Well, I'm like, you got the artillery, you blasted the shell down. Keep blasting away with the artillery, right? That's what artillery is for. Why enjoying go head to head when you've blasted the shield down with the artillery and you've got all this big artillery and they're defenseless. Blast them away.
Warfare is not to kill people. Warfare is to defeat their will to resist.
Well, that's not what they say.
So
Send in the robots to go and kill everybody.
You send in the robots. You send in infantry to take and hold ground. You send in artillery to break up cavalry charges and to weaken fortified defenses.
Okay, King Bob says it's the Phantom Menace that had the dome. I remember my friend Derek, after we got done, because I was so excited about seeing that movie. We saw it in the theaters on the day it opened.
I was too, and it was a waste of my money.
And we came out, and I remember
I
was
wanted
shocked.
to like them. I wanted to like them, and I did for a while, and then I didn't. So I'm sorry, the prequels were not good.
Yeah, and that's what my friend said. We got out, and he says, that was not good. So that kind of wrapped it up. Well, I want to get to this other idea. Boy, see, we're having so much fun, and thank you for.
We haven't talked about the Muse or the beauty like at all.
Well, we talked about the Muse. We talked.
Okay,
I've got to go watch back because I probably.
Are we done? Are we done with the Muse? Or we just both?
Well, we can circle back, but I want to get to beauty.
Okay, good.
And this is something else you told me. And again, maybe I'm adding things. I'm visualizing. You're painting the image, and I'm filling in all the details. And
that's the mission of writers. We just plant the seeds, like I said.
Maybe, but you had said something, because one of my questions is that in our society we seem to be celebrating ugliness.
Yes.
In all forms. We want people to be as ugly as possible. We want our art to be ugly. We want everything is ugly, and beauty is no longer celebrated.
Correct.
Nor is it even studied or idealized, or it seems to be taken away from our modern culture.
Correct.
And you had some interesting insights onto why that was. And I wanted to hear it again, and then I want to ask you some more questions about that.
Well, this is a case where I don't remember what I said, but I do believe that beauty comes from God, the same way truth and virtue do. And that at first, when you reject part of what God teaches, you can cling to the other parts sort of by inertia. But that the logic of the universe, the logic of reality, will force you one step at a time to give up more and more territory as you slowly turn from good to evil. Your choice is either to repent and return to the good, or to give up more good as time goes on. There's not an easy stopping spot. There's not a point where you can say, I will be this ungodly and no further. Some people can do it for a time. You can be an honest atheist who keeps his word because of his pride, for example, or he can have some other reason related to what he regards as the social utility of having integrity. There are such men, but a society in general over generations can't maintain that balancing act. They have to go, well, if there's no such thing as the conscience, if there's no such thing as God, then the conscience is a social construct. If the conscience is a social construct, there's really no such thing as right and wrong. Those are like the rules of grammar, merely rules that we all agree to for some utility. But if we agree to those rules for utility, then only utility matters, Well, likewise, if you then say, if everything is a social construct, so is our notion of beauty. In fact, our notions of beauty are merely socially determined, as we can see from the fact that the Chinese write from right to left rather than left to right, or up to down, or so on and so forth. The way they do the dresses is differently. The way they do the music is different, Now, such argument overlooks the fact that all races of man adorn their women and play music. All of them have some basic notions of beauty, though how it's incarnated differs. Okay, one spirit, many bodies. Understand? Now, but if you stop believing in the spirit, if you're a materialist and you think everything is matter, then you think that beauty is merely one way of organizing matter in such a way as to produce a chemical reaction in a nervous system of a meat robot known as a human brain. And if anything else produces that reaction, then that's equally beautiful, because there's no objective standard anymore. Everything is in the eye of the beholder. If beauty is in the eye of the beholder, then society makes beauty, then society can change its mind, can it not? Right. So if it says, if suddenly you say, well, I think that the Venus de Milo is beautiful, I think the golden mean is beautiful, I think the stars in the sky are beautiful, and if that's arbitrary on my part or conditioned by my society, then a different society, a society of evil dark dwarfs from the core of the planet who sacrifice children, will say the stars are not beautiful because there's no cave to protect us from their hideous emptiness. Women are not beautiful. Your human women are too tall. No, we think spiders are beautiful. We think dung is beautiful. We think an empty cow head is beautiful. We think dipping a cross in urine is beautiful. Because if all you're trying to do is to get a chemical reaction from the brain, shock will work as well as sublime beauty, according to that theory. So if the theory is wrong, the conclusions of the theory will be wrong, and your art museum will be filled up with things that are beautiful merely because the artist says so. Well, who picks who is an artist? Not the public. Okay, because if the public picked who was an artist, we'd still be listening to John Williams' music the same way we used to listen to Beethoven. He's a classical composer. Star Wars is a classical music piece. Okay, we don't listen to it anymore. People who play video games, however, do hear marches and other epic musics that are not played in concerts anymore. Okay. Meanwhile, the music that's on the radio is like this chanting, drumbeat, shouting, usually shouting filth, usually about killing cops and raping women. Okay, it's just terrible. It's deliberately evil, it's deliberately ugly because the ugliness is meant to shock. Once you stop believing in beauty and you stop looking for it, the only thing that will shock you, the only thing that will jar you awake out of your jaundiced stupor is ugliness. Now, that's not the whole explanation, because the whole explanation, once again, is supernatural. Behind every natural explanation, there's a supernatural explanation. It comes from hell. Hell is ugly. Hell is distorted. Hell is gargoyles. The gargoyles want everything to look like gargoyles. The garbage soul wants everything to look like garbage. The ugly soul, the beauty is the external expression of your internal worldview. Okay? That's a theory. I'm not sure if I believe it, but I think there might be some truth to it. And if you are a person who doesn't believe life is meaningful, then your art has to be meaningless to reflect life. It's got to be a light going off and on in an empty room, which was actually a real piece of art that someone put in an art museum. Or it's got to be a urine that you dunk sacred objects into, because desecrating things is the only thing you've got left. The golden mean goes by the wayside. Pictures that look like something go by the wayside. Things that uplift and ennoble go by the wayside because you think nobility is false. You think goodness is a lie. You think virtue is something the powerful use to trample the weak, because everything in your life is a power struggle because you're a Marxist. Okay? The Marxists are Gnostics. The Gnostic believe that the God was evil and created the universe as a trap. The Marxist believes that freedom is evil, that laws are evil, that capitalism is evil, and creates the laws and the free market as a trap. And so for the Gnostic, the only thing he can do is break the moral laws of the moral order to break out of the trap. That's for the Gnostic. For the Marxist, all he can do is break the laws of economics, pretending he can get something for nothing, to get out of what he regards as a trap. Well, if you're an artist and you buy into the Gnostic worldview or the Marxist worldview or any worldview that rejects God, then you think the rules of art are a trap. You think the rules of beauty are culturally conditioned by evil white men, banker, Jews, the man, the establishment, as a trap. And so you want to defy them. You want to shock them. You want to shock the bourgeoisie by having art be startling and amazing. And it looks like a junk heap. It's indistinguishable from rubbish. You know, people have taped a banana to a museum wall and had people come by to admire it because they've been taught that beauty is not real. Now, once you're that far down the road, you also believe that logic is not real, so you can't be talked out of this worldview. You also believe that truth is not real, so you can't come to the realization that what you're doing is untrue, and then you're stuck.
Well, okay, and those are good, valid criticisms of beauty, and the alternative worldviews that devalue beauty. But I want to talk about the positive version about what is the meaning of beauty in a context in a Christian context, like, okay, so those are negative views to shine a light on what is. But you had said something that I've really been thinking about, and I would like to hear more of your talk on this. And maybe it was just my projection onto you. It's possible.
No. In this case, that was something I actually said.
Well,
beauty comes from God, like truth and virtue come from it.
Well,
we are made in the image and likeness of God. We are made in God's image and likeness, so we are creative. Every little children wants to draw colors and wants to do things, wants to make things. Okay. We use art to reflect nature, to reflect the beauties in nature. In the old days, the word for the art and the word for craft were the same word, because anything we made, we tried to make both functional and beautiful. Okay. Now everything, even those primitive men, back when we all lived in the woods, would decorate their spears and their stone knives, or paint themselves, or paint their tools. okay, with ochre or woad or something, or the caves, they stored grain in. I did this because some artist would leave his handprint before the invention of the signature to show who had done it.
Well, the thing,
some of those artists were brilliant, and they studied their animals very closely, and they had a good sense of proportion and motion. Beauty is the only argument in favor of God that is not in words.
okay, now
There are men who, when they see beauty, they say, "This world cannot be meaningless. This world cannot be just the pit of hell that the materialists say it is. It can't just be the accidental garbage heap of molecules that were thrown together blindly at random. Excuse me, I shouldn't say at random. Technically, it's without a deliberate purpose.
right.
You could have an orderly process that is purposeless, like a snowball going down a hill. That's an orderly process. It gets bigger, and you can even calculate out how it acts, but it's not for a reason. But once you see anything in life that is for a reason, you say that life has to have a reason. So anything in nature that looks like it's for a reason and it looks beautiful, you say that is the hand of a craftsman. Because if a wing is for flying rather than just being for no reason, or if an eyeball is for seeing rather than just being for no reason, then something had to intend it to happen, and it wasn't the molecules of my eyeball, because they cannot conceive of intention. And if a woman's eyes look beautiful to you because you're being drawn toward her by the great god Cupid, then whoever made her eyes was a craftsman indeed, has captured your heart. Well, those roads, if you follow them all the way back, lead back to God. Even if you only get as far as the unmoved mover of Aristotle, or the good of Plato, or the deist god, the watchmaker god of Thomas Paine, you're at least on the road, you see. So the bad guys, the devil hates beauty for the same reason he hates the Jews and hates virgins and hates mothers and hates babies, because he was undone by a baby. He hates beauty because beauty reminds people there's more to life than the prison.
Okay, this is the point that I'm picking up on, that I want you to focus more on, because that last sentence. You said the devil hates beauty because it reminds people, and I think the way I heard it was that there is a higher goodness, that there is something transcendent in the world.
Yep.
And that it reminds people of that when they encounter it. It's a call to something higher than ourselves. Can you expand on that some more? Because that's the point that really is just resonating with me, and I want you to hear more of your thoughts on it.
I'll explain. I used to be an atheist. The world atheists live in is a coffin. There's no outside.
Is a what?
A coffin, a sarcophagus. If you're an atheist, you're living in a tomb that is sealed. You are going to die, and you're going to turn into dust, and there's nothing. That's the atheist world. Okay? Now, it could be a big coffin that has planets and stars in it. It could be 15 billion light years in diameter, but it's still a coffin. There's no outside if you're an atheist. You got the picture?
Right.
You are on death row. Everyone you know is on death row. Everything you love is on death row. Even the most enduring monument ever made is going to be forgotten, if not in 100 years or in 1,000 years, when the sun blows up. Okay? Everything is futile. Entropy always wins. That's the atheist worldview. Every now and again, we humans come across something that reminds us that this is not a death row. This is not just a prison. Okay? People call it escapism, but if I can misquote J.R.R. Tolkien, the only people who don't like escapism are the people who are primarily concerned with escape. And who is primarily concerned with escape? Jailers. Okay? So if you are living in a prison, if you're living in a tomb, and you're living on death row, and every now and again, the window opens and you smell the spring air outside, and you hear the birds singing, and you see the stars rise, and you see the winking asterism of the belt of Orion, and you go, there's something else outside there. Where did that come from? Where do these things come from? You see, or you hear a whisper in a dream. Do not fear to take her as your wife. And you go, well, wait a minute. Was that what was that? Was that for real? Was that from outside? You hear tapping on the wall. So someone's digging you out. You hear a rumor that there's someone who actually got out of the prison and can get other people out too. There's somewhere there's a holy grail that if you drink from it, you will never die. Now, you understand?
Yes.
So these things, these echoes, even the pagans are aware of it. That's why everyone worships some sort of god. Everyone has some sort of account of the afterworld, because nobody can really believe deep down the atheist worldview. If you try to believe it, you'll end up being a nihilist.
Okay,
at
but
best.
you are an atheist who converted to Catholicism back when you were about 41, which is about the time that I also converted. In fact, I think you're me about 15 years in the timeline separated. We're on different time spheres, but
yes.
But and I hope to reach.
That's why you have to stop complimenting me, because of course it's just self-admiration on your part.
Right. It's all it's projection. But I want to push back on you on the harshness that you're giving to atheists, okay? Because
harshness.
Yes, that's pretty harsh.
What did I say that was harsh?
Well, it's pretty harsh, but I'm going to push back a little bit.
Harsh in what way?
And I have a very good friend who's.
Sorry, what do you mean by the word harsh? What did I say that was in any way harsh at all?
Well, I'll explain. Okay. So the thing is that I have a very good friend who is very much an atheist, but I admire him for his commitment to truth, and that he is seeking the truth. And he cannot bring himself to make the leap of faith that is required to become a Christian. Now, he is struggling. He's very intelligent, and he is struggling with the truth, and he is seeking the truth. Now, I see him suffering, and I think there is a truth that he is not perceiving, but his commitment to the truth shows a commitment to a certain value set that is required, I think, to come into faith. Because if you build a building of faith on a foundation of sand of untruth without exploring the truth, then it's a weak foundation and your faith will fall. I have to
interrupt.
Go ahead.
How is this question at all related to anything I said? I said nothing about whether or not atheists believe in the truth. I said nothing about whether or not atheists have integrity. All I said was they live in a tomb. They believe that there's nothing outside the universe.
No, you're right, and that's a valid criticism. And I think it's, and we both.
It's not a criticism.
Well, it's a representation. It's a valid representation.
Yes,
but what I'm saying is that. Okay, so what is the atheist not perceiving that you are perceiving, and that what is that leap? I mean, maybe people need to understand your because maybe people haven't seen your leap, but you have a truly incredible story of conversion, much more dramatic than mine. Maybe it's because you're a writer, but you were a hardcore atheist, right? I mean, you were somebody that was actually the Paul who would condemn the Christians, right?
Yes. I was a vituperative, evangelizing atheist. I tried to talk people out of believing in God, and I was successful on at least 3 occasions. Fortunately, on 2 of those cases, the person has since come to their senses and turned to Christ.
Despite your admonition.
Correct.
But how is it that you came to faith being such a hardcore believer in nothing?
Here's how. It happened in 2 steps: a supernatural step and a natural step. Now, do you want? I did give this story last time we spoke. Do you want me to repeat the whole thing, or just
say again?
I did give this whole story last time we spoke.
I did, but some people that may be watching this for the first time, because we are live, may not have heard it. So.
Allow me to give a highly abbreviated version.
Okay.
The reason why I was an atheist is because I could not reconcile the world as it seemed to my senses and to my human reason with.
Oops, I'm sorry.
It now says I'm added to the stream, but I've lost your face. I can't see you anymore. Are you in the stream?
Yes, I was giving you the full thing. So here, you got the stage. I want to hear.
Distracting. Don't play around with the controls while I'm talking.
See, I'm trying to get you to get center stage because it's such a great story.
Please stop.
Okay, I'll stop. See, I can't help, but I'm fiddling.
Thank you.
All right, I'll stop.
I don't need advice from you, woman. Here's what happened. I was an atheist. Atheists believe there is nothing outside human reason as a tool to learn true from false. My human reason told me that the claims made of God were self-contradictory. I could not reconcile them with what I saw of reality around me. Okay, I did not think the accounts were reasonable. I didn't see them as being any different from any other mythology of any pagan. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
I did not see how a being could be omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent, for example, and allow evil in the world. Problem of evil. I did not see how a being could act and also be omnipotent and omniscient, because in order to act, you have to have a desire that's unsatisfied and then move, for example. I didn't see how a timeless being could interfere with time. I didn't see how timelessness and time could interact. And so on and so forth. I had various problems with it. But here's what happened. First, I noticed that my fellow atheists were all going crazy. We atheists do not believe in magic. We don't believe in supernatural. We don't believe in spells. We don't believe in spirits. We don't believe in ghosts. Nothing, okay? We believe that the world is as it is. Now, I did believe in the mind. I did believe in free will, because obviously I decided to believe in free will, so therefore I have to be able to make decisions to do that. I believed in the truth, because otherwise I can't say it's true that there's no God if you don't believe in the truth, okay? I also thought the truth was the highest value, because if you don't believe in God, you have two choices. You can either be a stoic and do your duty regardless of your personal preferences, or you can be a hedonist and indulge your preferences until you destroy yourself. Since self-destruction struck me as illogical, I was stoic, okay? Now, so my love of truth said the atheists are on the side of reason. We're the truthful people. And then my fellow atheists all went crazy, like I said. They believed in that we should remove "in God we trust" from our money, as if it was a magic spell that would make people into Christian by reading the words. But it's not a magic spell. They tried to remove a cross from the image of a Spanish mission that appears in 1/4 of the Great Seal of the city of Los Angeles, or maybe it was San Francisco, as if the cross would hurt us by driving back our vampire selves or something. My fellow atheists started believing in magic, and I couldn't understand it. Now, some of these atheists are atheists because they're communists, which I, at that time and still now, simply regard as an ersatz religion. It's a mystical belief in collectivism that merely attributes to man those things we normally, the Christians attributed to God. But I regard it as a religion. And I reject
right,
it.
it's a substitute. It's an
My
idolatry.
atheism required me to reject the communists as being insufficiently godless, you see. So then I began to read C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton. And I found men who were so much like me in their attitude and their beliefs and their conclusions that I couldn't see how they could be so different from me in their assumptions. So I said, something is wrong. This doesn't make sense. According to my worldview, the atheist worldview, atheists are rational and not crazy pants, and the Christians are crazy pants because they believe in basically Santa Claus. They believe in a sky father who gives gifts and so on and so forth. He knows when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, right? You know, it's a childish belief, or so I said at the time. But the opposite was true. The atheists were crazy pants, and the Christians were the men of almost perfect reason. You know, they're reasonable about everything. And then it happened. A friend of mine and I got into a discussion about homosexuality. And I said, homosexuality is illogical. See, I didn't say it was immoral because I didn't believe it at the time. I just said it's illogical. If your desires do not line up with nature, then your desires are false to facts. That's illogical. And he could not admit this. He had a sibling who was homosexual, so he didn't want to betray her faith in her. And he was a Christian at the time. And I then found out he believed in premarital sex was permissible. I said, wait a minute, you can't believe in adultery and fornication. Not only does your God not believe in that, but neither do the witches of the Norse, the pagans of the Greeks, the servants of the Pharaoh, nor does Confucius, nor does Buddha. They all condemn fornication unambiguously. You can't believe in the supernatural world and think that there's no moral order to the universe aside from your desires. He said, well, if it doesn't hurt anyone, it's okay. I said, well, what about suicide? Suicide hurts you. You know, what about making prudent provision for if you bear a child? You can't just kill a child if he's inconvenient to you. That's murder. He said, well, what if it's the womb? I said, well, what if it's your grandma? What? As a matter of logic, what difference does that make? Okay. And then he was not the only Christian I met who didn't believe in the marital bond. And I was like, wait a minute. Now, at this time, keep in mind, I'm a complete atheist. I do not think marriage is a sacrament at this time. I merely think it is a logical convenience necessary for an alterichial species like ourselves. We humans have to mate in pairs and form a lifelong bond in order to raise the children so that their chances of survival are increased, because life is better than death. I took it as an axiom, life good, death bad, because anyone who doesn't accept that axiom is dead, so I don't need to argue with them, okay? And I also took it as an axiom that truth is true and that the statement there is no truth is not true, because anyone who says it thinks it's true, okay? There are a wide number of things where all you have to do is listen to see whether or not the guy is sawing off the branch he's sitting on. Most of modern philosophy can be rejected if you merely hold them to their own standard, which is what logic does. So logic brought me to the place that said, well, wait a minute. If marriage is a moral necessity, because you have to be honest with your mate, you have to be honest with your kids you may produce, the mating act is ordered toward producing children. That's what sexual reproduction is. Sexual reproduction is sexual reproduction. A is A. My sense of logic told me that had to be the case. Now, all this is very much against my inclinations and against my will, because I wanted to be a libertine. I wanted to live like a character from a Robert Heinlein book where I could just fornicate with glee and abandon, okay, with no consequences. That's what my emotions wanted, but I was a Stoic and not a hedonist, and a Stoic does not heed his emotions. They are not instruments for detecting true and false. Logic is the instrument for detecting coherency, true and false. So, logic said, when I was arguing with my friend, the conversation I just mentioned, I said, do you think sex is merely a sport, like mixed doubles tennis, that you engage in with a member of the other sex, in order to have fun? I was trying to shock him. I thought his Christian sentiments would be shocked at the core by referring to sex as being something so trivial as calling it a sport, a pastime. He said yes. He shocked me. I was actually stunned into silence. And from how often I talk on this blog, on this podcast, that's not easy to do. I was actually shocked to my core. And I looked up at the empty sky and I said, dear empty sky, dear God, I don't believe in. How in the world, who robbed my friend of all romance? Who robbed him of every love song, every play, every poem, every TV advertisement, the whole man-woman dynamic? Gone. Jupiter and Hera, Jupiter and Juno, Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, Romeo and Juliet, all of them mean nothing to him. How is that possible? He can't understand West Side Story because he doesn't know what it means to fall in love with someone. If you think sex is nothing.
If he is being truthful with himself, if
all
that's a true statement,
all I can say is what came out of his mouth. It's shocking.
Right. You're holding him to his own values.
Who robbed my friend? And I'll ask you the question. You probably know. Who robbed my friend? What made it so my friend could believe that sexual reproduction was not sexual reproduction?
Well, it's the secular belief. It's the valueless, Satanist, nihilistic worldview.
Did it exist before
robs life
1930?
of meaning.
Did it exist in the West before 1930, the Lammerth Conference?
Did it exist before 1930? I don't know. It was before my time.
The answer is no.
Okay.
It was not until the pill that someone could actually believe that sex had no consequences, that it wasn't for a purpose, that sex was not sex. In fact, people believe sex is not sex so much nowadays, they don't even think biology is biology anymore. They think that sex is the pleasure of sex. Sex is mutual masturbation. You just happen to be in the room with someone else who's also pleasuring themselves. Now, who was again, as my atheist brain went, okay, atheist brain, you are a complete cold Vulcan. Who condemns contraception? Absolutely. And I said, my hated enemy is the Roman Catholic Church. The most Christian of Christians, the most ancient of institutions. They're the only ones who are sane. They're the only ones who held out. All the other denominations admitted either partly or wholly. What is wrong with them? How come they believe in God, Santa Claus, irrational creature, but they're right about everything else? Now, this was just one issue. This was just the contraception.
No, this was
every other
another
social issue they were also correct about.
I've used this, by the way, it was some of my atheist friends, which I love it because they agree with me on so much. And then they think, but how can you be so right on everything, but be so off on this one core thing?
Right. Because
I stole that from
my sense
you.
of logic told me if you agree with the assumption, you agree with the conclusion. You can't come to the conclusion without that assumption. You see? If the worldview is coherent, how does it come to pass that all my atheist friends, I did not know a single atheist, okay, no one I had read who believed that fornication was wrong. Ayn Rand, who is a objectivist, a libertarian, an atheist par excellence, whom I rather admired as an atheist, not only promoted fornication in her books, she also was an adulteress in real life, And Robert Heinlein, who also regarded chastity as a hoax, he says so in so many words in Glory Road, And he's just basically he's writing books and lying to children about what sex is for and what's it about. Also an atheist. Okay. Now, Heinlein thinks you should serve in the military and be loyal to your country. He believes in patriotism, and Ayn Rand believes in truth and logic and reason and productivity. All these atheists have virtues, but for some reason, when it comes to keeping your word, keeping your covenant with your beloved wife, with being romantic, with caring for the children, that goes out the window. Heinlein even expressly says in many cases that you have to care for the children and put their priorities first. Okay, and yet he thinks being a swinger is a great idea. He thinks polygamy is worth experimenting with. Come on. Okay, so the atheists were wrong. I tried reading Thomas Aquinas to see if someone could logic me into believing in God, and I found to my surprise that the ontological proof of God, the 5 ways proof of God, which I thought contained an error when I read them in school, when I read them in college. When I reread it, the error was not there. I had made the error. That kind of shocked me. So there I was with the book open, and I was still on part 1 of chapter 1 of verse 1. And it took me like a day of just thinking so hard my brain bled to try to comprehend how cleverly and how logically he had put this all together. Because Thomas Aquinas, I'm sorry, he's a Houyhnhnm. He's a creature of pure logic. He's wonderful. But of course, I'm mocking the Houyhnhnms, who are stupid creatures. If you read Thomas Swift, they're dumb as horses, really. They're Spartans, basically. So I looked at the rest of my book was in my right hand. I said, if there's a God, does he actually expect an illiterate peasant in the Middle Ages who spends his life following a plow to reason his way to him? Wouldn't God, if he was a good God, put some easy shortcut way, make himself apparent to every man, write his laws on the hearts of men so they were obviously there, write his signature in the stars and in the heavens so it was perfectly obvious that this is a created world and not thrown together by accidental molecular action? Wouldn't he like put a conscience or something in every mind? Wouldn't he be there? Wouldn't he answer prayers? Wouldn't it be obvious? And of course, to my atheist mind, it was not obvious. None of those things persuaded me. So I looked left and I looked right, and I saw there were no atheists around. So I got down on my knees and I said, God, I know you don't exist. I can prove it with a rational argument as clear as anything in Euclid. But I'm a philosopher. My sense of honor, my sense of philosophical pride forces me to admit that I could be wrong. I can't imagine how, but let's just say for the sake of argument, I am. I can think of no way you could persuade me you exist, because even if you appeared before me surrounded by flaming angels and seraphim, I would think it was a hallucination. I would dismiss it. And there's no logical argument that can prove you exist. But you're omnipotent and omniscient if you exist. So either you can prove you exist to me, or you don't care whether I'm damned, in which case, the hell with you. And I'm thanking you in advance for your cooperation in this matter, because I didn't know how to pray. I thought you signed it like a letter. So I got up and dusted my knees off and said, honor is satisfied. If God does not somehow force me to believe in him, then no God, and I'm off the hook. Well, within the next day, I had a
next day. Let's make a little star here.
I had a heart attack, and I was dying, and my wife called her practitioner friend. She's a Christian Scientist. They have a healing ministry. I was healed like that. Pain stopped. Okay. I said to the wife, take me to the hospital because I want to figure out what had been wrong, because there was nothing now. And I said, that looks like a lot like a miracle. That can't happen. Miracles don't happen. I'm in the hospital, the Holy Ghost comes to visit me. I become aware that I have a soul. I was not aware of it before. It was not in my consciousness. Okay. Now, your friend should write quickly that I must believe in the subconscious mind, because obviously I was unconscious of something that was real about me. So I became aware that I had a soul. It was shocking to me. I could see it. It was there. It was. Excuse me. You can be deceived by things you see. You could look at a stick you put in water and it looks bent to you because your eyes can cheat you. But what's directly present to your awareness with no intermediate medium, you cannot be deceived about. You can't think you're thinking something when you're not thinking it. You can't think the words, I think, therefore I am, and at the same time be mistaken about the fact that you're thinking the words, I think, therefore I am. It's immediate. I immediately became aware of the divine. I felt the Holy Spirit pour faith into me like wine into a dirty cup. I felt it in my heart. It became real to me, like that. That was just the first. I had a miracle, then I had a religious experience, then visions started. People came to talk to me. Now, some of the spirits told me not to say what I saw, which really surprises me.
This is the truncated version, right?
I didn't see anything that's not in the gospel. I didn't hear anything that was a surprise. I don't have any Fatima secrets, okay?
You don't have a new book that you're going to write that append.
No, I'm not Muhammad, and I'm not.
Or to say that to support you on your yacht in the Mediterranean.
No, I'm neither Muhammad nor am I a Mormon. I have nothing new to add to the divine revelation. In fact, it rather shocked me that I was told not to speak of it. But then again, when I read the Bible, I found places where it said, where Jesus tells people not to talk about things. Okay, so what do I know? I'm obeying orders. I was wrong about everything in my life, so I'm not going to stand up on my high horse now and
But
start
this is very
people wiser than me.
This is a very Pauline type story.
Oh yes, of course. I'm the reincarnation of Paul, except for there's no such thing as reincarnation. You know what my favorite parable is? It's the one where the guy who gets hired at the 11th hour when everyone else has put in a hard day's work comes sauntering up, does an hour's worth of work, and gets the same wage as all you guys who worked your whole life.
There's a sense of injustice, right? It's like, how can that guy get the same wage that we got? We've been toiling all day.
You know what my least favorite part of the Bible is? When St. Thomas doubts the Lord, and the Lord comes and he says, go ahead, stick your finger in my wound like you said you were going to. And he says, Christ says, blessed is he that believes without seeing, because that blessing is denied me. I believe because I saw. I believe I'm the only Christian who believes for empirical reasons. I believe in God because I saw him. Okay, after I asked him to show himself to me. Now, you might be wondering, well, why doesn't he do that to every atheist? I have no idea. Don't ask me. Well, I will say this. I'm fortunate in being so stubborn that when my atheist friend said, that clearly is a neurological malfunction in your brain, you didn't actually see that happening. And I said, how come I'm not dead? They said, well, obviously there could be another cause. It could be a coincidence. I said, fine. I'd like to have more coincidences like that in my life, please. Because it saved my life, because a prayer saved my life. Well, they said, well, we can't prove that with cause and effect. I said, I don't know. Have you studied how often prayer has effects? There are people who do such studies and you don't read them.
But your commitment to truth is what led you to faith.
Absolutely. That's why my wife married me and could put up with me.
Right. And this is a question. How did you
get into I was worshiping him without knowing it? I'm Emmett from The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis. I was willing to put the truth above my own ego. That's what that prayer was when I said I could be wrong. Well, I didn't believe I was wrong. My ego told me I was right. But the sense of honor told me I could be wrong.
I'm going to ask you a question about
sure.
A lot of my people have read my book Prepare, which I wrote 2 chapters on my faith, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, because how many people have actually had to really think through what they believe. But one of those things that kind of, when I was writing, and it was the Muse speaking, I was noticing there's so much idolatry in the world, and idolatry substitutes for God. And when you're not a believer, you have faith, but you may be unconsciously placing it in a vessel that's not worthy to contain that faith. We see that all people worship government, they worship themselves, they worship money, they worship everything except God. That is all idolatry, right? So let me ask you to judge yourself pre-conversion.
You want to know what I was? It's really obvious from my story.
What were you?
Is that what the question is? I'm kind of stepping on you. I should wait for the question to be asked. Go ahead. Ask the whole question.
The question is, what was your idol that you were worshiping that was the false idol that you had to dispense with?
Reason.
See, that's one where you can put your finger right on it. And that is the conscious mind, the higher brain. Well, C.S. Lewis talks about this in his Abolition of Man, about that the higher brain function the rational brain does worship itself, and it is jealous of the chest function, the faith function, the valuing function, and it wants to wipe out all competitors to its power, and that includes God, and puts self above God.
Right, because I did not want to have a mind superior to my mind telling me what to do. You see, I did not even think such a thing was possible, because even if you're receiving an order, you have to use your reason to interpret the order and decide whether or not to obey it or not. You know? So I idolized reason, and that led to pride, and pride led to both good and bogus arguments against God. I think there's only one good argument against God, and I don't mean good persuasive. I mean good. You have to ponder it. I think that's the problem of evil.
Right. Okay. Well, and that is been a problem.
Have to have an answer for that question. I myself think the answer is Christ, and it's not an answer you can put into words. So we're only going to be able to talk about it elliptically or through parables or riddles. And so the atheist is not going to understand us. But I also think the atheist is not going to understand us because he idolizes himself, his reason, and his pride. You see?
Well, this is a universal question that has been answered by, or at least attempted to answer by many theologians, and that is the problem of evil, right? The problem of evil and the problem of suffering in the world. How can a God exist to allow children to die of cancer? How can a God exist to fill in the blank of evil and suffering? Why does suffering exist?
Right. Now, the interesting answer is that my Eastern Orthodox friends have said, well, why are the atheists unhappy with the answer? Christ will raise those people who died of that and wipe their tears away and grant them blessings and undo the harm that was done, so that the lion will lay down with the lamb. The murderer and the murdered person together will sit down in the feast of Christ. All will be forgiven. They'll love each other. Love will replace hate. Joy will replace sorrow. The thing has a solution. Why don't you try to find the solution? The solution is Christ. If you're not in with Christ, then you are not looking for the solution to the problem of evil. You see? Now, I thought my Eastern Orthodox friend was being very clever with that answer, but I don't think it would persuade an atheist, because I think the atheist has to be persuaded at another level. I think his reason is not going to, I don't think you can't reason someone into falling in love.
Okay.
God does not want people to simply believe he exists. A deist thinks God exists, he just doesn't believe in Christ. Okay.
Well, and
the devils know God exists. They don't have theological arguments about that. They just are not loyal to him. God wants love. God is love and wants you to love in return. He's the good, and good wants goodness. That's the nature of good. God is logic, logos. Logic wants consistency, wants logic in return. Okay. God is beauty, so he wants us to produce beauty. God is a creator, so he wants us to be creative. God is truthful, so he wants us to be true. Okay. Faith, we often use it to mean, atheists think the word faith means believing something without evidence. That's not what it means. It means being true to your word. Once I've given my word to God and I said, God, I am on your side. I am your servant now. I'm going to keep my word. I'm being truthful to it. I'm being faithful to my word. It's like being faithful to your wife, you know?
Absolutely. Well, and this is another, I am so connected to what you're saying. And I mean, it's resonating.
We established that I'm the future you from 20 years from now.
Yes, you're my future.
But if you don't turn into me, I'm going to turn into mist and dissolve into nothingness. So, I should be more careful what I say.
We don't let our time stream cross.
I'm not going to tell you the winning lottery number for tomorrow. I'm tempted though.
Yes. Well, I think we've determined that you're between 10 and 15 years ahead of my timeline. So I'm talking to my future self that I hope to be, although we come at things. The thing is that we have
no spoilers though. No secrets can be revealed.
No secrets, because then it would short circuit the reality and probably eliminate one or the other in our timeline. So we got to be
writer's headache. I have a personal theory about time travel stories that I should tell you at some point. They're Escher drawings. You're trying to make something that's fundamentally illogical look like it could somehow happen. And the delight of a time travel story is seeing how cleverly you can hide the fact that what you're saying makes absolutely no sense.
You do a darn good job in this book.
Thank you. Escher also does really good jobs of making it look like you could have a waterfall, pour water into itself, and turn a water wheel to raise the water to make it go through the waterfall. Yes, he make a staircase looks like it goes up in a circle. Sure.
The thing that you do in this is you acknowledge the problem of time travel, and it's like,
I think the problem is a moral problem. If you're a time traveler, you have to live as if the ends justify the means, and that's the devil's work. That's the tyrant's plea. Necessity is the tyrant's plea.
Where is this book in the sequence of your writing?
I don't remember.
Were you a faithful Catholic when you wrote this, or was this pre-religious?
I honestly don't remember.
Wow. See this. You've written so many books. See, I get so much.
Those were written as short stories and published in an anthology called. Gosh, I'm gonna be embarrassed if I can't think of the No, it wasn't sci-fi. It was the. I'm embarrassed. The editor was really nice to me, and I want to remember his name, and I'm going to be so embarrassed if I can't bring it to mind. Tales of Mystery and Beauty was Clockwork Phoenix. It was in the Clockwork Phoenix anthology. Look up Clockwork Phoenix online so I can give the guy's name, because he was a sweetheart. He bought my story when it was beyond his length limit. Two of the stories in that anthology were in his Clockwork Phoenix. Mike Allen? That sounds right. Mike Allen. Mike Allen. Shout out to Mike Allen.
I know I can see him. It's just his name is similar to another guy we know.
Can the wife come on and say hi to my chat?
Mike Allen, definitely. It's Mike Allen.
The viewers want to see Mrs. Wright. We keep her in a purdah. We have her
in a cage. Let her out of the cage. Let her to talk.
Cover her face with a veil before.
Hi, Mrs. Wright.
Hi there.
How did you fall into this lovable scoundrel back when he was such a faithless guy? What did you see in him?
I think I just use the word.
Hey, no talking. This is a question directed to the wife. Come on, wife.
So the first time I saw him, he was role playing in a college dorm, and I walked in to use the refrigerator to get my friend's medicine. He scowled at me, and I kind of left an impression. But I didn't get to know him until later. I joined the role playing group, and so we were friends. But I was dating somebody else, and I don't want to insult the poor fellow. Anyway, so John and I became friends, and I fell in love with him when watching the movie Pygmalion. So I was sitting at home after I graduated watching Pygmalion, and there's a scene where Leslie Howard, who looked a bit like John looked back then, he was tall and a lot thinner, and he's leaning on his mother's piano. And he's brilliant. No, leaning. He's leaning on it. And his mother is horrified. And I looked at him, and he was this wonderful mix of, wise man and fool. And I said, John's just like. So I spent 6 months carefully figuring out what 5 different things that I thought I was good at that he'd like, and trying to demonstrate, to him that I was, whether it was discussing economics or cooking or whatever it was.
She was doing this the whole time.
Yeah,
she was calculating,
carefully calculating
how to ensnare me in her web.
Oh, yeah.
Thank God.
The ladies do the selecting. We know this, right?
Yeah, well, I believe we women are supposed to run in front of the guy until he thinks he's chasing us. That's how
okay. Yeah. See, there you go.
But I was working on the running in front, and then we got together that summer. And he moved up to live near me. And as he said, he was so devoted to truth.
Could you flatter me a little bit? I took everything I owned and threw it into my Oldsmobile Buick and said, I'm going to go there, even though I have no job, no future, and no prospects, and no place to stay the evening, to be with my true love.
My house because my dad.
Okay? So I just drove, leaving behind everything.
Pretty romantic. I'm a little romantic on the atheist part.
And his car never went forward again. It would only drive backwards.
It broke.
It lasted only long enough to get him to me. But in my church, we say that truth is a synonym for God, because it says in the Bible, God is truth. So I looked at John, and about that time I read the Inklings book and had a lot about C.S. Lewis when he was young. And C.S. Lewis's conversion, he reminded me so much of John, and I just stopped worrying about the fact that John was not a Christian at the time. I just felt like the fact that he was so devoted to truth meant that he actually loved God, and even he didn't know it, and he'd find his way. And he did. It took him quite a while, but he did. So we got married in 1989, and he converted in 2003. So it took a while, but.
Well, congratulations. And so you've been married, how long is that, 89?
34 years last week.
Now, the wife put up with my atheist argumentation for decades.
It was hard.
Because she would answer my questions, and then the next time I'd forget what she had said, and I would go back to my talking points again.
Right, but I mean, it's really hard to have somebody who's skeptical asking you questions all the time, over and over again. And I would just go and sit and.
Why is it hard to answer questions? What makes skepticism difficult to answer?
I would just try. I would try.
Why would you try?
He said I was almost the only Christian he knew.
Completely logical.
Took his questions seriously and tried to come up with real answers for them. And I never got tired of doing it. I'm not saying I didn't feel weary sometimes, but I kept trying.
So the woman is the one God picked out to put up with me. And then the sneaky God crept up on me while I wasn't looking. It was hardly fair. Tricked me into praying to him you know what it was like? And I think I said this the last time. It was like that. It was like me sticking a fork into a light socket that I'm sure is turned off. There's no such thing as electricity. Okay. It's like one of those experiments of a mad scientist too. The thing cocomes to life. Okay. Or you mutate yourself.
It was a pretty amazing period. And
I got to say one thing about idolizing reason, though. Let me interrupt my beautiful wife.
No, it's
he's
charming. He's a charming guy.
I thought reason was the thing that gave meaning to life, that was the source of morality, that was the source of truth and beauty, and all the other things that people normally attribute to God. It was an idol. But when I converted, because I was so convinced that God was illogical, I said, Lord, I will give up reason for you. I will believe all the illogically unreasonable things that Catholics believe for you. And then I read the catechism. And I said, these guys are completely logical. They make more sense than the people I just led. I went from being a two-dimensional logical person to a three-dimensional logical person. Nothing had changed in what logic said. It's just I now saw the meaning of it as well.
Arguments, and I would say logic is a tool like a screwdriver.
Right.
And he would say, no, it's a thing in itself, and eventually.
Well, he did because logic
God
turned and looked at me. The truth, which I'd always followed my whole life, turned out to be alive, and it turned and looked at me, and it was Christ.
Well, see, now it's such a beautiful story, and I love it. I've been married for 24 years, so I'm 10 years. John's 10 years ahead of my timeline. So we're talking across the stellar medium here.
Yeah. He has a book he's worked on once or twice called Letters from Tomorrow. About letters between his atheist self and his modern self.
Because most atheist arguments are weak, and they can be made much stronger. And every atheist who's ever come to argue with me has given weak arguments rather than strong arguments. And I just pity them. I can do what they can do better than they can.
He was a scary atheist, you know.
I know. I could see him intimidating.
It took me years to recover, you know, because I started questioning all these things and wondering about all.
It boomeranged on me.
It was hard.
I talked her out of believing the historical legitimacy of parts of the Bible.
Yeah,
and then when I became Catholic, I went, "Hey, that's actually true because the church says so." And she said, "Wait a minute. How do we know that this part of the Bible wasn't written in later by Josephus or something?" You know. And I was like, "Okay, I created a monster."
Green is a author. I was a Catholic author, right? But I don't know when he converted. I don't know.
I know Graham Cracker was a.
It's hard to live with him because of the humor level.
Yeah. How do you distinguish when he's being like this sarcastic kind of like?
So you think that, you know? I'll tell you, I didn't used to be able to tell.
You what?
Okay, so I didn't used to be able to tell when he was joking and when he wasn't. He convinced me that you could legally lower your age, and my friend was standing behind me laughing because she knew he was tricking me.
I did it, but now, I did the trick one step at a time.
Now I've gotten so that I can tell, and because I can tell when his father does it too. It's an eyebrow thing.
Well, is it because of the eye twitching and the
eyebrows? They do a thing with their eyebrow. I mean, I couldn't reproduce it, but I catch it when they do it.
It's a tell, like gamblers can see when they're.
You'll have to wear the sunglasses if you're a poker player.
Yeah, so he doesn't usually get me nowadays.
No. My kids can tell too, usually.
Talking about when daddy's trying to trick us by being funny.
Can they? I don't know. Actually, you know, I have a stone face. I've realized this doing arguments in court, and it's a valuable thing because, you know, like when the other side makes a point that's devastating to my argument, I can sit there and it doesn't even faze me. But inside, I'm going, ooh, right?
I'm impressed because that's the main magic power of my main character in my novels.
She's poker face.
Is that she can make her face go quiet like that.
Yeah, so that is a skill, but you know, there's
a comment in the chat. There's a question: are they sweet? The answer is yes.
Are they sweet?
No, they are sweet. This is my
the answer is yes. The wife and I are ridiculously sweet to the point of sugar overload. You'll have to do without cookies and sugar for a week now, just seeing us because of the saccharin content of our sweetness.
The period when John converted was really kind of an exciting period with one miracle after another. Even his roommate in the hospital had a healing.
Yeah.
And one of the coolest parts is that an entire book was given to him, the outline, all at once. So if you ever get a chance to read Iron Chamber of Memories, I'm not sure it's even out right now, but we'll get it out again. That's the book that came to John all at once, right after his heart surgery, right after his heart attack.
Right.
And it was so amazing because he had been an atheist. And then 4 days later, he's going off to surgery singing Christmas carols with the orderly.
With the orderly, yep.
Well, it's so wonderful. It's a beautiful.
Because God answered my prayer, and He did it very literally, and gave me. Oh, I didn't even mention the other religious experience I had, where I was taken outside of time and shown the fine structure of the universe,
like 2 weeks later.
and shown how free will and determinism can coexist, and so on and so forth.
Wife, is this a real story? Is this one of those?
Yes,
well, this is true.
real story.
This is absolutely true. It happened like 2 weeks after the first one.
So I had
up and you told me about it. It sounded fascinating.
A miracle.
He refers to it every now and then.
I had a miracle. I had a vision. I had several other visions. I had several miracles. I had prayers answered, and then I had another religious experience that was not the same as a vision. It was an entirely different thing. I made contact with the mind of God.
Yeah.
And it was too complicated for me to follow what he was thinking. He's smarter than me, which is kind of shocking. It doesn't happen to me that often.
So there was a whole bunch of things at that period of time. It was a very interesting.
I mean, I was getting prayers answered like that. A bee would sting me, and I would say, "You are not my God. God is God," and it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, just rapidly, things like that. Now, at the time, because I read C.S. Lewis, I had been warned that your belief, your emotions come and go. That there's going to be dry periods and fertile periods. It happens to every Christian has moments of doubt, but so does every atheist. Just by the way, an atheist will be like walking through the graveyard and go, what if there is something more to life than?
In fact, there was a time when John's mom was ill, and she was recovered much more quickly and much more than anyone expected. And this was some years before his actual conversion.
Yeah.
And he began to think of converting for about a week, and he actually
read
the Bible, and he got to the part where they're killing everyone, and he gave up on it.
Yeah.
But that was like a moment.
I don't recommend the Bible to anyone who wants to convert. I recommend the Catechism.
Well, Psalms is
the Catechism
are the right spot.
Who nowadays can understand the Elizabethan English needed to understand and appreciate the Psalms?
You don't have to read.
Shout out.
What? That's the only thing. The only drawback that I have to being a Catholic is that they do not respect and revere the King James Version. Because, of course, King James went in and erased the parts where it says that Mary was full of grace and put in like highly favored or some other BS.
Yeah, I got some problems with the King James Version because
it was written by Shakespeare or someone named Shakespeare.
Right, and it's a beautiful writing. It's very English and it's very beautiful. But is it really the best translation given the current state of the art and the?
I am of the English. I'm of the Anglosphere. To me, to cast aspersions on it is like saying that Shakespeare didn't write a bunch of Shakespeare did not write a bunch of cliches into his plays.
I think that
I mean, you look at Shakespeare play, to be or not to be. I heard that before.
For the poetry of the language, which I find is helpful with praying, there's no better version. But when I want to actually understand what it says, I go online and look at the versions.
I also am familiar with Elizabethan writing because I'm classically trained, so
Yeah.
To me, it's not a big.
Let's go. Brandon's in the chat. Just want to let him know. I've been drinking this sidecar for you, buddy. For like how long have we been?
Oh, that's what he meant by sidecar. I thought he meant a motorcycle sidecar.
No, this is a sidecar. It's a tradition.
Don't tell my boss back when I was a bartender, because obviously I should know the names of these drinks and how to mix them.
Okay, well, he's a good man, and
I knew enough of them to know how to do it a little bit.
And this is a question.
They hired me because I wouldn't drink the stock. That's why, by the way.
I'm sorry?
They hired me as a bartender because it was teetotaler and I wouldn't drink the stock.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. It's beautiful to like what here. This is exactly right. Teresa says, I love learning about what others believe. And I think it's hard. And this is as a Christian, you want to share your story. But it's not for everybody. Everybody has their own path. Everybody has.
I do not want to.
I love it. It's a beautiful story.
Be that as it may, I've been ordered to. It's a great commission. Christ said we have to do this.
Right.
Doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It's nice to like it though. Sure. Listening to a conversion story is like listening to a love story. They're all fascinating.
But it's not that like
not everybody is ready or that's where they are.
But everybody has their own individual path. And so And this is the thing. It's like my story may be completely different from your path. You're a different person. You have your own path to follow. Now, you may learn, you may glean a wisdom, a bit of nugget that when we're interacting, I'm not following everything you're saying, but I'm picking up wisdoms and bits of nuggets. It's resonating. We're communicating. And that path is my own, and I have to find God in my own way. And by listening to others' faith and their journey to faith, it may be, okay, that's not my path. That may not be that doesn't resonate with me, but it may. And so it's not like this is the way.
You are quite correct. Some people should be Franciscans and others should be Dominicans. That's
okay. Well, right. Well, but it's a mistake for Christians to come at people and say, this is the way, I know the way, and you must follow my way.
No, it's not. We're right and they're wrong.
Well, no, wait a second. Back off, buddy. Listen to what I'm saying.
We can't approach it that way because
that's a Protestant.
If I had gone to you and said that when you were an atheist, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere.
Well, certainly. The technique of persuading them, you do that by writing stories. You do that by living your life in a way that shows the joy. You do that silently, trying to actually.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Basically, this is my big.
Be ready to answer any question they ask you, but don't bring it up unless they ask. You see, even I did not tell the world my story until someone in a newspaper interview asked it of me. You see, and
but
then
it's a beautiful story.
My orders to answer.
It's a story of
redemption. I would have answered. I'm sorry,
okay.
you keep talking over me. I don't know if you heard my answers. That's why you can't follow what I'm saying. Go ahead. Your turn.
No, what I'm saying.
You wasted your turn. Stop. Go ahead.
See, he knows this about me. He's picking on me because he knows that I get criticized for talking over people, right? And so he's picking on me. He's making me pay for my sin.
You're really lucky because I'm trying really hard to not talk when he's talking, but normally he and I just talk all the time at the same time.
God gave us 2 ears. Clearly, it's so that both people can talk at once. That's what husbands and wives are supposed to do. We are one flesh in the eyes of the law.
But he was trying to say something.
Yes, go ahead. You have the floor.
No, my point is that I think that's a big problem with a lot of the atomization of the Protestant churches, where they get in these little doctrinal disputes. Because I went to a Baptist school, was raised Protestant, and I remember going into the Protestant groups. And it was like, you've got to believe what we're believing. We know this is our doctrine that we've all settled on. And if you don't, you got to go and have your own little church. So everybody's got their own little church, right? Yeah. As opposed to the universal church. I remember my priest, Father Bill, he was very much like, well, this is the church's belief, and this is why. And we all have our own path, and you need to find your way. And nobody's been to God and come back and reported all of these things, but this is the best we can do with our flawed beings. And let's be part of the same universal church. I really liked that about Catholicism. And it brought me in because I'm not caught up into, it doesn't separate. It's not dividing me from my brethren, my fellow brothers in faith and sisters in faith. It brings us together where we can talk and we can have these kind of discussions when we're seeking the truth together and doing the best we can in a conversational way, when we're both have the foundation of truth and we're seeking God together. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh, well, yes, that's it, man. Come on, John.
You said something really ordinary, really not ordinary at all. But I will say this: when I first converted, and I found out, it's like being on death row, and you find out that the governor's called and giving you a pardon, and you're not going to die ever. And then you find out that you're the son of Caesar, but someone who's greater than Caesar. And you're an orphan, and you find out both your parents are still alive. And you go going, yay, wonderful, my parents are still alive. Then you find out they've divorced, and they say, we have our church over here, and we have our church over there, and you have to pick which one to go to. And I go, wait a minute, aren't you Christians the guys who wasn't Christ's last prayer he said on earth before he ascended, keep together, try to stay together as a team, but you Christians had to break up and then force me to choose between you? That seems very unfair to me.
John was really bothered by that at first, and I didn't understand why, because it was obvious Christian Science saved his life. He should be with my church.
I was tempted. I thought I should be too.
But after a while, I realized that everybody on his blog was Catholic. And I thought, well, I don't know what it is about it that makes it that, but it's clearly where he's supposed to be, because there's clearly a meeting of minds there,
Well, and I
My
don't
wife
know.
is saintly. I believe that parents should be of the same denomination raising their kids, and the fact that she's willing to tolerate me being not of her church is remarkable to me.
My dad was an ex-Jewish Buddhist, and my mom was a Christian Scientist. I'm used to people making allowances for what other people.
I will say one thing as an atheist that many Christians will not understand. Imagine there was a cluster of beliefs forming a basic kind of a half circle. And where you are on this half circle depends on when your leaders decide to break away from the church. And I have a lot more respect for the Eastern Orthodox because they broke away. They waited until the year 1000. And then there's an atheist who's over here. I'm further away from you than the witches are, because the witches at least believe in the supernatural, and I did not. Okay, so here we go. Here's witches and pagans and all sorts of people, new agey crackpots. And then around here you get into people all of whom believe in Christ. Okay. You've passed by the Muslims, and you're now all people in Christ. But then when you're here,
the Muslims believe in Jesus.
Oh no, yeah, they believe Jesus was a prophet. They just didn't think he was the Christ. They didn't think he was the Messiah. You then have to pick where to land. And if you move to one side, you're moving away from the other side. But when you're here, you love everyone equally because you're going there. You're going that direction. So as an atheist, the differences between the Christians seem really microscopic from my point of view. I do realize there's serious differences, and I do realize that people fought wars over these things. But I really wish, considering who our enemies are, that there could be some way for the various churches to get together and just agree to kiss the toe of the Pope, and then that would just make things a lot.
Well, I'm a big fan of Harry Belloc in regards to that.
Hilaire Belloc.
Harry Belloc.
Hilaire Belloc.
Hilaire, but see, I just read it. I don't pronounce it. How do you know that that's the right way to pronounce it? How do you know that I'm wrong on the pronunciation?
Hilaire. It's a French name.
Okay. Well, see, now you're bringing
the
power. This isn't fair. He's bringing the power of rational argument to my stupid.
No, I don't think that was rational argument. I think that was experiential argument. I think I'm assuming it has French pronunciation, but I could be wrong. Maybe it was Hilaire. Maybe it was Eclair Belloc. I think it's
I'm an American, so I'm going to call him Harry Belloc. How's that? And he addresses this in a book called The Three Heresies.
That's okay, Mr. Gosnay.
Yes, that's right. Well,
certainly, Mr. Gosnay is speaking. I'll be quiet.
It's not. Yeah, no, that's all right. No, yeah. I'm just riffing because it's an interesting book that is dated in politically incorrect, therefore wonderful and worth reading.
Which one are you talking about? The Great Heresies?
The Great Heresies.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I have it memorized. Yeah, okay.
It really bothers me though when the different Christian groups attack each other rather than the
there's
world.
So much commonality.
We're in a foxhole, okay?
Going, oh, we sent missionaries to Ireland, and I go, really? What about all these places where they don't have God right now?
There are places that still have witches, okay, that are still actively casting spells, and the Christians are the only people who can deflect them. Now, you might not believe in the supernatural, but I do.
There's some great...
I believe that the devil worshippers are worshiping something, and sometimes there's an answer, okay?
There's a number of amazing testimonies in my church keeps a magazine of all the testimonies of prayer, and there's a number of in Africa where, a snake comes into the room and the person prays and it vanishes. I mean, just that things are, they're facing things that are at a much different level than
I
what we see on every
also do not believe that miracles only existed in the early church days, because not only did I get saved, not only did one happen to me in my lifetime, but Augustine speaks of them, and he's AD 500, and there have been Marian apparitions as recently as last week, and some famous ones during World War I and II, and she's popping up all over the Middle East, converting people to her son.
Well, we believe in a living God, and if the fact is that I believe that my conversion is a miracle, and I feel that was divine. It was a miracle that saved me, but does that mean that God is ever present? The God is present now. The faith is not dead. The faith did not end with Christ. It lives in each one of us. So if the miracles are still happening, then that means that God is ever present, right? So I think that, I don't know where I'm going with that, except that I was saved in the Catholic Church. My wife is a cradle Catholic. She's from the Philippines. And one of our deals when we got married was that we would raise our children Catholic, and that I would go to her church, right? I mean, I didn't care. I was marginally Protestant, maybe even agnostic, and was put in a hole of depression and difficulty that I could not escape, with hatred in my heart that was dragging me down and taking me away from my family, which I loved, right? And was bringing me down. And the Lord's Prayer in the Catholic Church, for the 1,000th time, for some reason, took the hatred out of my heart and gave me new life as a miracle. Now, and you know, it's like when you look back and then you laugh at your prior self. You're like, well, what about this miracle? What about this miracle? The miracle of meeting my wife. She's from the Philippines. She was raised on the other side of the earth, and I was raised it couldn't be more diametrically opposed, right? Exactly 12 time zones away. She was born and raised in Manila, and I was born and raised in Ormond Beach, Florida. Never the twain shall meet, and we're made for each other. And we didn't meet until we were, older. Like I was 30, she's 28. So how is that a miracle? But of course, the arrogant, rational self. Well, coincidences happen, and this.
It also depends on how you're using the word. I mean, the word miracle has myriad, has slight distinctions between. There are events that are miraculous to us that an observer would not see anything unusual. There's also things where a guy is dying on the ground and someone prays and he stands up and he feels fine. Okay. There's also guys who are paralyzed and they take up their bed and walk. The second group is a little more public, but I don't know if it's any more or less of a miracle. Well, one of my friends was convinced away from atheism and back into Christianity when my wife prayed for him, and he could feel his desire to be addicted to cigarettes. He could feel the smoking desire, which he said, if it's not a demon, it might as well be. It was something in my brain that was clutching at me. Give up. Went away. You see? Now, that's not something you could show to anyone else. That's not something you could see, but it's miraculous.
We're somewhat similar in age. I guess my dad was older to my dad and my mom. So my mom, when she was 12, she read the Life magazine, right up on the Nuremberg trials. And it cast this dark pallor over her life. And for about 6 years, she was just always depressed, and she was reading the Bible and praying for like 3 hours a day. She got to college. She went to a Christian Science college, and there was so much joy, the whole thing lifted. She married the man who wrote those articles. He's the reporter John mentioned earlier. My dad was in World War II. He went on to cover the Nuremberg trials. And she never told him because she thought he'd be sad. His articles had depressed her. But I thought it was really neat that she'd been praying about those articles, and my dad had things he was dealing with from his time in World War II, his whole life, and God got him to the woman who'd been praying for him basically since she was 12.
Yep.
And she was like 28 when they met.
Wow.
God's amazing.
It's hard to there you've got to come at things with some humility and not worship the rational brain. It's a very easy trap for us to get wrapped up and think that we know it all and we understand everything. Yep. And humility and a grounding of truth, a dedication to humility and gratitude, I think, are the keys to heaven.
What saved me was the fact that despite being a very arrogant atheist, even more arrogant then than I am now, was the fact that as a philosopher, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine a sum greater than infinity, but let's just try. A trans-infinite number. My sense of honor would not allow me to admit that I could know the truth without it being open to question. Does that make sense? I thought it was dishonorable to retreat from a question. Therefore, I was always willing to admit that I could be wrong, and therefore I was always willing to open my beliefs up to examination by others.
In fact, one of the things that happened right close to when you converted was you were in a conversation with Mark and Bill and I.
Yeah.
And he said he realized that that if an angel came or, that he would have just written it off. And he realized.
I said that earlier.
Yeah, that he had come up with excuses for everything God could do. And he's like, well, I have to be open to the fact that if it's true, it has to be provable.
Having devoted my entire life to philosophy, I realized I had a silly circular argument that I was basing my life on. Yeah. So
interesting. I love it. It's so fascinating, and I love hearing it. And this was the short version. right?
That was
Also left out the fact
I
he
left
went
out a
to
lot.
church with
You
you.
left out a lot.
I left out a
The first
lot.
time he'd ever gone to church, he came because it
Well,
was
normally my
Thanksgiving.
home starts smoking if I try
It
to
was
cross the threshold
Thanksgiving,
of
and I
church.
told him it's tradition in my church that the non-members, family members, come on Thanksgiving, and he liked tradition.
Tradition,
So the whole thing
tradition,
happened like the next day.
tradition. Who is the one who comes with the house? Okay, sorry. I came
No,
up with
you could be a
there.
topol.
I never sang when I was an atheist. I never sang a note. Now I
Well,
spend all my
again,
time
we're talking
playing.
about beauty and music. I think music brings us closer to God.
And joy. I believe music comes from God. Animals do make musical sounding noises, including birds, but they don't compose
They might
sound.
be expressing God's joy.
Maybe. I did have a character in my story who could understand the speech of birds, and they're singing orisons to Christ every morning because he brings the sun. So, but that was, but it's not, let me put it this way. Talking about miracles is difficult. That's one of the things that C.S. Lewis had so difficulty with. He wrote a whole book on it. I used to think that there was a distinction between the mind and the body because I used to be fooled by Descartes. I don't believe him anymore. I believe the Catholic view of life, that there are things called sacraments, which are external and visible expressions of internal realities. Okay? I believe the human beings, every single one of them, is sacramental in that nature. Our soul is expressed in terms of our form, in terms of our body. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That you can't separate the two. That's why when the reincarnation comes, we're going to be reincarnated, not just float around. Plato wanted us to be insubstantial spirits for the rest of eternity after we get to the world of the forms or wherever we thought we were going. So I don't think that when people ask me about a miracle, I say, if the governor pardons a guy on death row, has he broken the law? The governor, mind you, does he or does he not have the authority to do that? Mm-hmm. Well, has he broken the law? You're puzzling over it. So I thought this was an easy question.
Well, see, this is the problem with talking with you, is that you are well grounded in the classics, and you went to a
I'm asking about a governor writing a stay of execution.
You're grounded in
break
philosophical
the law or not break the law.
I don't know when you're going to pull out a Plato or a Descartes book on me and hit me with it.
Bugsy is on death row. The governor writes at the last minute, "Don't kill Bugsy." He hands it to the warden doesn't pull the switch. Did the governor break the law? Yes or no?
No.
No, because that's a legal property given to the governor. Okay.
I always feel like I'm being set up here. Why is that?
When someone prays to God and says, "God, I would like my husband not to die at this time, please," and so he writes to the executioner and says, "Do not take away, dear Archangel Michael, do not take away the husband at this time." Is he breaking the law? Is he breaking the laws of nature? No.
He can't break the laws of nature.
He can't break the laws of nature. He is the laws of nature. The governor is not breaking any law. He's merely overriding the local authority of the prison guard, of the prison warden. You see? The events that, if you found out that every event in the Bible actually also had some sort of mechanical explanation, that the Ten Commandments were written by a very clever asteroid strike or something while the mountain was erupting. That was okay. Well, let's say you
they shouted in March made the wall fall.
Let's say you traveled back in time and you saw that when the Joshua was walking around Jericho, blowing the trumpets and shouting, that there was a perfectly ordinary, reasonable reason that, let's say, the archangel Uriel undermined the walls and caused an earthquake. Okay, and that it was clearly there was a winged super being there that changed. Okay, that wouldn't mean that God didn't order him to do that. God works through secondary as well as through primary causes.
Or even if marching and shouting was going to make the wall fall down, and God just told them how many times to do it. Yeah, it's still a miracle that they knew what to do.
It's not magic. It's not a formula that if you do the formula, you're going to get the result. That's what.
Right.
That's what the alchemists thought they could do. Well, they could get to God without God. That's why I'm not really a big fan of alchemy. Even though I think they're kind of cool in stories because they have alkahest and they can,
well, it reminds me, it's good grift for fantasy novels. But I will say that it reminds me a little bit of the whole thing about the guy who who's on the top of the building and it's flooding, and he prays to God for salvation and saving, and in the boat comes and he says, "Oh, don't worry, I prayed, God's going to save me." And the helicopter comes and he says, "God's going to save me," and he drowns and he's at the gates. "Why didn't you save me?" He's like, "What are you talking about? I sent you a boat and a helicopter," right? So
yeah. Here's the funny part of that story. Sometimes you're the guy in the boat. Sometimes you're the guy in the helicopter. Yeah. You don't know it, but sometimes you're an angel of God. The word angel just means messenger. I don't mean you're a member of their species.
No, I understand.
You see, if you're the kind of person who, when the boat shows up, says, "God sent me a boat," in addition to thanking the driver, then, sometimes it's worth seeing a little more of God.
Right. Well, yeah. And we need to, and I preach a lot on my channel, and thankfully my viewers like me preaching the preachy gospel. Occasionally, maybe I don't know. It's who I am.
It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with you. The sweetness of the truth is so rare these days that we're like people staggering through a desert hoping to get to the pool.
Right, exactly. And I feel it's necessary, and I think the crisis of faith is so important, and speaking truth in a world of lies is a revolutionary act. And but one of the things I try to do is always uplift people who are around me. If they're there and they're willing and they're listening, I want you to be the best person you can possibly be. And that to me is a gift. I mean, it's like I'm doing God's work by making you a better person, by opening your eyes, by speaking the truth, by interacting with you and getting the best out of you. If I can do that, then I'm doing God's work, right? I mean, it's like there's a religious calling to doing your best when you write a book or play a guitar or write a merit brief or, parent your child. He's calling you to do the best that you can do in all things. And that includes uplifting your people around you to bring the best out of them.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. See there. That's all I got. Every once in a while, he gives me short answers and I don't know how to respond. Right. But that's
you said it. I agree. There's nothing to dispute about that.
Yeah.
God, I can say the same thing and using different words. If God makes you a ditch digger, then dig your ditches for the glory of God. If God makes you a writer, then write your writing for the glory of God. Well, I'm not sure if I ever finished my story about. Did I actually finish the story where I said I used to write and hide my beliefs because I wanted to be an entertainer? And then a woman sent me a tear-stained letter. I helped her, and I said, "Okay, from now I'm writing for the glory of God, and devil take anything else. I don't care anymore. Okay, if he wants to make my books good or make them famous or make them whatnot, let it be in his hands. I'm not gonna worry about it anymore. Because I found out that if you fear God, you can't fear man. You're free. You become like a superhero in your heart, if nowhere else. Now the hard part is liberation saints, and that's a very high bar, and I'm not sure I can do it, but maybe the Holy Spirit will help me.
But by doing the best you can do in the books that you're writing and serving the muse and allowing beauty to come from your fingertips to the best of your ability, you are in fact doing God's work.
Maybe I'd like to be.
Well, and this is like when I read back my books, I'm like, these are just terrible.
I mean, I didn't make my writing quota yesterday. I only wrote 600 words instead of my normal 2,000 a day.
Well, Well, you write faster than I read, but I will say, and that's
why I believe in the muse. That's why I don't think it's me. There are people who write faster than I do, just by the way, and I have a day job. I do not make enough money on my writing to live off my pen.
Well,
I wish I did. Tell your viewers to all buy 20 copies of my books. They make great Christmas gifts.
Yes, buy 20 copies.
Or doorstops.
Yes, in fact, which one should we promote though?
Yes, all of them.
All of them. Well, Count to a Trillion. I got to figure out which one's next on my list. Do you think Count to a Trillion should be on my list next?
I believe that I have no idea what should be best on the list. You should read Shadow by Gene Wolfe. You should probably reread Lord of the Rings before you read my books.
You said the golden age is between these two.
The golden age is I throw the reader into the deep end of the pool without explaining anything, because some science fiction readers like to play the game of trying to figure out what the world must be like in order for that sentence that they're reading to make sense.
Well, what does Mrs. Wright think about?
I was just going to say the golden age is currently out of print, but about to come out again.
Okay.
He has another fantasy series, if you like fantasy, that's not available at all, but I'd be happy to send it to you.
You're talking about Moth and
I don't even have it.
We don't have Moth and Cobweb?
No, not Moth and Cobweb, the other one.
What's the other one?
See,
Evidence.
Evidence. Yeah,
If I get it, when we get it worked out, I'll send you one. But anyway,
that's one of my
and then there's Moth and Cobweb, which is my favorite of his series, which is
mine too.
Definitely fantasy. But the Golden Age is really. I was just describing it to somebody, and it's really eerie, and it's like we know people who read it like when they were 9, and it made a huge impression on their lives.
I also have fans of my Nightland stories.
It's pretty. It's got like every science. So one of my favorite scenes in the Golden Age is the main character's been thrown out of society, and he has to go.
Spoilers.
Yes.
He's not thrown out of society.
You want to do this? You really want to do this?
I'm just describe this one thing. He's visiting this spot where they have these houses that have been junked, and the junked houses are super, super, super modern tech to us, but they're old and buggy to the society of the future. And I thought that section, like if they have things like when you sit down, the chair doesn't even fully form under you to your shape. I mean, that's just so old fashioned. Anyway, he does things like that really well.
That's cool. Well,
I recommend you read Swan Knight's Son, which is the first trilogy of Moth and Cobweb.
Yeah, if you like fantasy, I would definitely go with that.
I'm not sure where
recommending other authors.
No,
What's
that's
that?
John's first Moth
Say it
and
again.
Cobweb.
Repeat. How do you spell that?
Swan Knight's Son. I think right now it's not even available. You have to look it up as Green Knight Squire in a hardcover. If you want an ebook, I will send you one.
I'll just send you a free copy.
It will be, hopefully this will all be fixed by the end of the year, but there's a bunch of things currently they're not out there.
Yep.
But it's Green Knight Squire is 3 books together. Swan Knight's Son is the first of the 3.
Yep.
Okay, Squires. I'm writing these. Well, I tend to see I'm a little dense, and I need to be literal, and I need things that I don't like puzzling things out too much. I kind of like the unfolding. Zelazny. We were both Zelazny fans. He's
Me
one.
too. Everything I write is kind of Zelazny.
Well, notice how cleverly Nine Princes of the Name is structured. You start with a guy who's an amnesiac, so everything he learns when you learn it.
Right, exactly.
And the supernatural elements come on stage one step at a time.
Here are the suggestions. So if you like fantasy, read Awaken the Nightland, which is in many people's favorite thing that John's done.
What is it called?
Awaken the Nightlands. It's a sequel to The Nightlands by William Hope Hodgson. It's 4 short stories put together into kind of a book.
Yeah, I told him that this book scared me.
Yeah. And then also read One Bright Star to Guide Them.
Repeat that one.
One Bright Star to Guide Them, which is very short. It's like a novella rather than a book, but it's kind of imagine books like Narnia 20 years later. It's that kind of book.
Yeah, what do the grown-up Narnians do?
The opening is that this guy comes out of his business, his office in London, and there's the talking cat who sent him on an adventure when he was 10.
Who's calling him to a mission again?
He wants him to go do something now. So those 2, I think, really worthwhile.
But unlike the 10-year-old, he has to take off work. He's not sure if he should do it.
Yeah.
Who, me?
No,
the character. The
character in We Can't Both Talk at Once.
In One Bright Star.
I'm getting confused. See, I need literalism. I need. Your wife is charming. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Wright.
You can't have her. She's mine.
She's great. I'll tell you, she's cool.
I will send him links to the books that are currently available.
Abe Books. If you go to Abe Books, you can get ABE Books. You can get used books. That's how I get your hardcovers here. A lot of them, because you can get used books, not Amazon. And this is a hardcover Golden Age. I've got a hardcover Count to a Trillion, first printing. See there? So Golden Age.
By the way, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin in like 3 minutes. So.
Okay, well, this is, I don't want to take up. This is just so wonderful, and I love listening to you, and I learn, and I've got to go back and review, because you always get me thinking. You're inspirational, not only in your books, but in your words. And I know that we have a lot of people here in the chat who are.
And there's going to be a quiz later, so I hope you're paying attention.
Yes, well, and I would fail that quiz because I am. See, I'm learning. I'm just a student.
Okay, quick. Which city was founded by Constantine?
Constantinople.
Okay, you pass.
Okay, well, see, that's
I grade on a curve.
Which city was founded by Alexander?
That one I don't know. I'm assuming it's Alexandria, but who can guess these
Oh, there
weird
you
things?
go. Go ahead.
All of them. I'm going to say all of them. Everything throughout the Middle East and North Africa.
How many Alexandrias are there exactly?
That no one can answer. There's one in Virginia. There's myriads throughout the Middle East. So I will fail the quiz. I'd like to throw
you got it. You got it. You answered the question. Come on. It's he named every city he founded Alexandria.
And it was a lot of them too. And he died drinking. I mean, not to mock my drinking friends, but what a way to go. You conquer the world and then you get
Alexander the Great died drinking. Hello?
What's that?
Alexander the Great died drinking, you said?
You didn't know that?
No, he did not.
Killed them all. What do you mean? No, he didn't. Look it up. Don't believe me. Look it up.
I don't think so.
Don't believe me. Look it up.
All right. Well,
you don't need to take
I know that he died.
It's not a historically disputed fact.
I'm challenging this one. I think that he died because he
look it up. I will not defend it. You cannot challenge this.
Here's the alternative.
Go talk to a historian. Find out for yourself. Don't take my word for it.
I studied history. You studied great books. I studied history. My understanding is that he tried to cross the Great Desert, and in that attempt, he run his army into the ground, but did not survive that journey. You're saying this is incorrect.
I haven't studied history. I've never heard that story. He died in the desert. Did they recover his body?
Yes. Hold on a second. I'm going to do a quick little fact check while you're on the line because you get away with such things.
I am more than willing to admit I'm wrong. If it turns out I'm wrong about this, I'll be surprised.
Okay, we're talking about Alexander the Great, the conqueror of all of the known world, right? Yes.
The guy who cut the Gordian knot.
Yes, right. Oh, right. You see there. I loved Alexander's fascinating. He died in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, age 32. There are different versions of Alexander's death.
Yeah, it's several different ones.
Okay, 14 days prior, he spent the night day drinking with the Larissa. Okay, he developed a fever which worsened until he was unable to speak. The soldiers, anxious about the granted the right to file past him. And then in various recounts, Alexander was struck with pain after downing a large bowl of unmixed wine and following 11 days of weakness. Okay, so both involve alcohol, so I will grant you that. However, he did not die immediately of alcohol poisoning. He died after 12 days.
I did not say the word immediately.
Okay, well, but see, my understanding of what's the wife say?
We had been watching a historical documentary that referred to it as alcohol poisoning. That's what I said. But it sounds like there's some question as to exactly what happened.
Well, and my understanding is that he was greatly weakened by the crossing of the desert that he forced his troops on. And so he was celebrating after that journey. And maybe the alcohol contributed to his weakened condition, but he did not die immediately. He died after sickness, which may or may not been attributed to the alcohol. Okay, so we're not disagreeing. We weren't there.
That account doesn't disagree with anything I said. So
at least not in this timeline. Perhaps we were in an alternative timeline.
As with many historical events, if there's more than one account, then I'm not going to take a dogmatic stance one way or the other. So.
Yes. Well, yes. Well, here at Valhalla, it's my buddy Valhalla awaits. But I'm going to see on Friday. Didn't everybody drink wine then, though? Yes, I think that was kind of. Water was dangerous. That's alcohol killed the little buggies that were in the water. Well,
but even the account that I'm referencing doesn't say it's because he drank any wine. It's because he overdrank. It's because he drank uncut wine, which is the same thing that got the Cyclops killed, or at least blinded.
See the Cyclops reference. See that.
The old image of temperance is someone with mixing bowls. They're mixing water with the wine because the more water you put in to dilute the wine, the more temperate you are. So now you don't want to dilute it until it's not wine anymore, obviously, but it's a symbol of balance. In the Odyssey, the way Odysseus tricks the Cyclops when he's trapped in the cave is he shows him the civilized way of drinking, but he gives the Cyclops uncut wine with no water in it, so it's straight. Say, and the guy gulps it down, and then when he passes out, that's when Odysseus and his men grind a sharpened stake into his eyeball. Now I don't know if Alexander the Great was drinking uncut wine, but they didn't have fermentation process in those days. They didn't have brandy. They didn't have the really strong alcohols that we moderns enjoy. So.
Okay, well, with that ambiguous discussion, I will grant you adieu, and I thank the wife for loaning me you for such a long time, and it was a pleasure meeting her. Everybody go out and look up John C. Wright's fantasy and science fiction novels, and if you're a Star Wars nerd, get the get this.
Only if you like to see someone having an emotional, nervous breakdown.
If you want to see
favorite movie of all time is Blasphemed by a malign perpetrator of evil. Boy, I didn't like that movie.
Well, we have a lot of different. He's written, I think, at least 28 books. So anybody that criticizes me for writing too many books, I'm going to use John C. Wright as my example and say, you ain't seen nothing. I'm 10 years behind, but I don't think I'll get to 28.
You said you were a fan of Isaac Asimov. He wrote 100 books and then wrote a book about the fact that he'd written 100 books, and then he wrote some more.
Yeah, I thought he wrote 500 books.
You and I are both pikers compared to that. Yeah,
yes.
He put more than that. Sure. I'm just saying at minimum,
Yes, well, we are pikers. He would write a book a day, and an amazing guy. Piers Anthony was also very prolific.
Very prolific and professional about it. That's one thing I also liked about Shakespeare. When Shakespeare was asked to change something in a play, he just changed it, and he wrote it. He would rewrite it on the spot, and it would still be brilliant. So good for him.
Yes.
I'm gonna go now.
All right.
Thank you very much for having
God
me
bless
by, and
you.
thank you for inviting my wife. I enjoy sharing her.
She was great. And I will.
When it says that the two shall become one flesh, sometimes they mention that she's the better half, because it's clearly the last creation of God. The best thing that He ever does. We're made out of dirt, and she's made out of us because of the rib. You know what I'm saying? It's all symbolic. It's all highly symbolic, but it actually happened.
All right. Well, I'm gonna cut you loose, and I'm gonna have a discussion with Mr. Brandon here in the chat. But thank you, God. God has given me you to interact with and challenge all of my thoughtless beliefs. I'm gonna have to go back and think some more, and we'll do it again some other day. But thank you very much.
It doesn't sound like you and I disagree about much of anything.
No, but you always get me thinking and challenging what I'm thinking, and I have to come back and clarify. See, this is the problem.
Clarity is good. Clarity is always good.
Clarity.
Adios. I'm going to hang up now. Leave the studio. Bye-bye. May God bless you and your audience.
All right. Bye-bye, John. Wasn't that cool? How cool was that? All right. Well, let's go, Brandon. Yes, I did see. How's the GoFundMe going? It's not going so great. What he's referring to is I'm trying to get help this is Brandon. I owe Brandon a sidecar, so I'll get you that. And so I'll get that before we leave. He had to go, and I have to go too, but I'm here to give Brandon, I still owe him one sidecar, and I will finish this off. Was I going to tell you? See, this is the problem. It's one sidecar. It was a long night, but wasn't that amazing? I know. He said, how's the GoFundMe going? It's not GoFundMe. It is Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog. I'm trying to get, if you want to help out, with Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog, which is my next book, which is book 4, right? I'm working towards 28, but if you want to help out with, go to my webpage, stevegosney.com, and you'll go to the friends page, and you'll see a picture of Brucey on the friends page, and go there, and it goes to a Give, Send, Go campaign, which I'm trying to get Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog fully funded through Give, Send, Go. Yeah, I know I've got a lot of stuff, and people are criticizing me for promoting my books or whatever else. But, I do these things because I'm called to do them. These things kind of come out. And my next calling is this children's book. And I love this children's book. I've recruited a great artist. And did I show you? Let me show you this. Okay. I'll show you this, and I'll quickly get a sidecar. Okay. Hold on a second here. So that you can see. Well, maybe I can actually, you can follow along. That might even be better. Let me see. Hold on a second. I'll show you. I think it's this. Can you see that? Okay, so here's my website, right? You go up here to friends and see there's Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog. There he is. Isn't he cute? That's the real Brucey, the One-Eyed Wonder Dog. See, he's got the one eye. And I worked real hard to get an artist to capture him correctly. And I think she did a great job. It's kind of a traditional art. And there's his little brown eye. I really wanted the eye to be right because it's so expressive. And that's his color. And there's some pictures of him. So you can't see it that great, but maybe I can bring up because I got it on my home computer here. But that's, you can click through there. That's the Give, Send, Go campaign. You can just pray if you want to just send me a prayer. Let's see, where are we? We're at $90 of 2,500. But anyways, that's Give, Send, Go. I could show you. Let me show you a better picture because that's a little truncated. Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog. Yeah, here's show you this. This is cool. Share screen. Check this out. See, isn't that great? See, that's running and they're standing. Now he's got the brown here, but I fixed that so he doesn't have the brown because that real Brucey didn't have it. I'm bringing him to life because he was the best dog of all times. And so there's the Molten Salt. Thank you for your prayers. I understand. Yeah, John C. Wright. He's on a different level. Here, let me just grab this for. Let's go, Brandon. Then I'll get back. Hold on a second. Be right back. Okay, I wanted to tell you also. Just give you an update on the case. So that's isn't Brucey great? He's going to come to life. I'll make it happen regardless. The prayers are awesome, and here we go. So Brandon, do you want to remove the mod, or I can do that, or whatever? What was I going to do? Oh, Brandon, he says this. If the people come up with 15, I'll do 1,000, and that was the deal. I missed that offer. I didn't know that you offered that. But here's the Give, Send, Go, Valhalla. That's very kind. And yeah, so people, if you can help me out with it, it'd be good. I'm going to make it happen. You know, the problem is will I accomplish this? Because it might be my last children's book. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's going to go. I think it'll get supported. It's just a matter of time, how quickly it'll get done. But I've promised you a children's book before by Thanksgiving, and I'll get you a children's book. It's a matter of how quick I can get them done because I can work like a machine. It's already done. It's just a matter of getting the artist to finish the illustrations. The second one is my difficult dog, which I haven't even started yet. Or I've finished the book story, but I haven't gotten the illustrations done. But I want to tell you about my death penalty case. So I'm on top of it. You notice that I had a goodbye stream, but I'm streaming a little bit. First of all, these are easy streams for me as far as I'm concerned, because this is just, I can just let John C. Wright talk and I'm just here listening. And this is just a nice night of listening to somebody who's very intelligent, very thoughtful, and very kind. And I can learn a lot from and just listening to him, right? So it's just me interacting with him. So this is an easy one. Same thing with last night. I'd already written that stuff down. I actually thought I was going to have a guest. I got it out before, and what was it? See, Brandon, so I'm glad I did this before, after John left, because he's a teetotaler and he's already given me one. So I'm kind of on top of my I know where I'm going. I have an idea. I've read through the entire trial, which is about 1,200 pages, and I have a concept of what I want to do with it. Now, there's 5,500 pages I have to read in the record, but I kind of understand what that's going to be. It's hard to explain. Let me just say that I have a concept of the case, and I'm allowing myself a little bit of streaming, just as fun and entertainment. I still can't put the time into it like it requires, but I told you after a couple of weeks I'd have a better handle on things, and I do. So this is allowing me to do a few of these little streams here and there. Next Friday, I'm going to have a stream with Danielle, who's one of our chatters here. And she's going to come on, and we're going to have a birthday stream for her. It's her birthday, and she's great. So that is definitely, that's on the what was it? This is shit. I'm such a lightweight. It interferes with my brain functioning. Anyway, any questions on that? Oh, I know. I wanted to tell you. Danielle's birthday. Van Halla says, when's Danielle's birthday? It's next Friday, and she's going to be on my stream for Danielle's birthday. Or she's going to be here next Friday, the 7th. So I wanted to tell you too. I've got a short story, and I'm not sure if it's good or it's terrible. Chandler Remington read it and said it's good. Okay. I don't know. I wrote it for my son when he was in middle school. It's a autobiographical story. It's mostly good. Actually, Brandon, I think I might have said, did I send you this story? A couple of my close supporters, I did send the story to. I may have sent Brandon the story. He doesn't have to read it if you don't want to comment on it. But I have this short story. It's called My Summer Friend. And what I'm thinking I might do is I might put it out as like a little short story. Like John C. Wright has inspired me. Maybe put it out just as a short story, maybe ebook only rather than this, because I love books because I'm a lawyer, right? But put it out as an ebook only. And I'll give the people that have already bought my books, I'll send them out a little promo letter and give them a massive discount so they can buy it for like almost nothing, but then have it as an option so that if you want it and you haven't bought the book, it'll be available as an ebook. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Like it'd be a $5 short story on my website. But if you get it on ebook, it'll be an ebook only. And if you buy it as an ebook, maybe I'll do an audiobook too. But if you do it, if you've already bought a book and you sign the letter, I'll send you a code for the next couple of weeks. I'll sell it for like $2 or something, something like that. This is my, what's Molten Salt saying over here? Children's books will be reread endlessly, hopefully. I agree. That's what I really hope. Yes, and Jean says maybe it'll be turned into a movie. This book, I actually think I can visualize it as a movie. I really think it's a script. That's one of the reasons I sent it to Chandler Remington, because she's out in LA and she knows the entertainment industry. And I think it's got kind of movie potential. It's a very simple story about growing up and about, in fact, let me read you. Oh gosh. In fact, I sent Brandon this and I sent Chandler this, but I haven't sent them I've added just an intro and an outro based on some discussions I had, some suggestions I had about the meaning of the story, because I'm like, what is the story? But let me read you just this intro that I wrote. Okay. So you ready? This is the intro to My Summer Friend, which is my short story that I'm working on. All right. Let's see. I can't place exactly when childhood ended, but it was sometime in the summer after 6th grade. Before that time, childhood was filled with play. Green army men battled dinky die-cast toys on the carpet of my bedroom. Ever greater forts of Legos and Lincoln Logs housed Hot Wheels cars, ready to tear into the battle scene at the whim of my imagination. The concerns of elementary school seemed small, and the world followed a predictable rhythm. So that's the intro to My Summer Friend. And then so the story is about kind of an exiting of childhood and an entry into adulthood just over a summer. So that's I think that's what I'm going to do, because my wife says I should save it and put together a compilation of short stories as a book, right? But not everything's a book, and I could always do that later. And I have a few short stories kind of rolling around in my head, but they're not written. So I think I maybe just put it out as a little short story as an ebook. That would be kind of cool. And that would give something, and it'll be kind of a gift to people that have already bought my other 3 books, and it'll get something out there, and maybe get and Brandon, Brandon said that he will kick in extra money if people come up with like a matching type thing. In fact, maybe I could even reach out to you. Maybe we could even put that as part of the letter, but I'll put it as a promo letter so that we can get Brucey funded, right? Yeah, like Stand By Me. Very good. A noveletta. It's how long is this? I don't even know. It's not long. It's a short story, but it's meaningful, and it's actually semi-true. It's autobiographical. I changed a couple names. I edited a little bit, but it's actually very close to a true story. Let's see how many. It's 11,300 words, 31 pages. So, a short story. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. And, people now, they don't read as much, and it's a lighter read about childhood. The other thing, I wrote it for my son when he went into middle school, and middle school can be very tough. And I had a tough upbringing. I had a tough life, I should say. My life, as not the worst, but I had challenges, and everybody has challenges in that leaving childhood and going into adulthood, right? So I wanted to write something for my son so that I could share with him sort of my experience. But when I read it, I'm like, there's something here, and Chandler seemed to like it. And I haven't had feedback. I sent it to a couple other people, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So that's upcoming. Oh, and then the audiobook for Death Penalty Debates. I've worked very hard, and again, I'm taking the donations you're making and the books you're buying and things. I kind of shovel it back into the projects, right? Because I want them to be the best quality I can make them. And I did an audiobook. I did an audiobook of Prepare, and that was just me sitting here on my microphone, right? So if you get that, that's what you're getting. It's meant for you. It's a personal book. It's from my heart. It's me reading to you, right? But Death Penalty Debates is more of a wider book. So I spent some money, and I went into a real studio, spent the whole day, read it through in a day, and it is being edited, and it will be very, very professionally done by a professional book editor. And I spent the money to do that. And so if you get the audiobook of that, it will be very high quality, and that will hopefully be out maybe in a week. I keep saying that, but he's working on it. It's just I'm going on vacation on Friday, and it'll probably be done by the weekend, and I have to approve the final. But that one is almost done, and I'm thinking maybe I would put that one on one of these bigger. Maybe you guys could, if anybody knows how to promote ebooks, because this one is professional level ebook. Okay, it's done so that it could be distributed on Amazon or anything, but I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know, because I hate giving Amazon money because it's not, what did they do? Nothing. I mean, do you think that that's worthwhile? But on the other hand, it's a relatively short book that has mass appeal that maybe would draw them into the other ones. I don't know. I don't know. Share me your thoughts. Contact me. Oops, oops, I don't know where I've got hide current comment. I'm not paying attention. I'm just talking. We're talking now, right? John's gone. But if anybody who's still here, if anybody's still here and you want to talk with me and give me some ideas and share me your thoughts on these things that I'm telling you here at the end, just email me. Go to stevegosney.com, go to the contact page and email me. I really would like to hear your thoughts on these things and how not to how best to promote them. So so what else are we doing? I think that's good. Any other questions in the chat? You know, I don't get it. It's funny. I don't get many Rumble rants because I think I got some interesting guests. Aren't these cool people? I really like to bring in people that I want to talk to. Sharing a quick synopsis. Molten Salt over here says, sharing a quick synopsis of Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog story would be inspiring. I've read it before. I've read it in full. In fact, I need to put on the page me reading the book because I've read it front to back for you. But the idea behind Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog is that he's abandoned on the street. He gets adopted by a family, but he has one eye, okay? And he doesn't think that he's going to be loved because he only has one eye. And who would love a one-eyed dog, right? And but he's adopted. And he finds that you know, his mission, that he doesn't need two eyes. He only needs one eye in order to give love back to the Brandon, what's he say? Steve, define tying in the legal regulatory context. What's that mean? I missed something. Steve, define tying the legal regulatory context. What does that mean? I can, how do I mean? Oh, yeah, there's no obligations. There's no obligations here. Anybody that gives, you know, Brandon's very generous, and you know, people don't rely on him. It's not really fair to him that when you see him in the chats, let's get him to fund. I mean, I really want everybody, you know, I'd rather have a lot of little things. There's no obligation when he says whatever he's saying. There's really no obligation on his part, right? I mean, it's a gift. It's a gift from the heart. But I think that one of the things is people don't look to these people like that. You know, if you can donate a little bit, that really means a lot, you know, because I want everybody to have this book. I want you to read it to the kids. Well, let's talk. And it goes back to what Molten Salt was saying about Brucey. So he has one idea in one eye, and he finds that his mission in life is not flawed or not impacted by his disability. And we all have disabilities. We all have limitations, right? And it's a comment on our imperfections, but yet we do our best, and it doesn't impact our ability to find purpose in life. That's number one. Number two is it also is a comment on the Serenity Prayer. If you're familiar with the Serenity Prayer, the Serenity Prayer talks about, let me recognize the things that I can't control and the things that I can control, and the wisdom to know the difference. Right? So Brucey can't control his limitation, his one eye, the fact that he lost an eye, right? But he can control how he gives love back to the people, back to the kids, the children. So serenity is an important prayer, and it applies to Brucey. Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog has that theme also. And it's really a Christian theme, but it's not, it hits you over the head with Christianity. And we've been very hit you over the head. We've been very hit you over the head in this stream, especially, right, with Christianity. But the Christian message, the morality, the faith is grounded in sort of fundamental truths. And I want those truths to be buried in a real story of a real people and a real family adopting a real dog, but that has a greater meaning and a greater impact to your children, right? You want to teach them, when you're giving them a story, you want to give them a wonderful story about a child looking and having purpose and knowing that he's imperfect and but his life has meaning even if he has a disability, and that there's a lot of things he can't control. So that's Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog. Serenity and living with disabilities. Accepting those things we can't control. And that we all can give love. So very good. So Molten Salt, I need to get that video of me reading it on the Give Send Go page. You're right about that, and I thank you for your comments over on Rumble. Okay, comment on our imperfections is a good way. Well, it's more than that. It's transcending and finding a purpose in life, because especially men and boys and men need to find purpose. We need to find our purpose, and what is our purpose in life? And Brucey found it. He found it through giving love. He could provide it, and his disability didn't prevent him from finding that purpose. What is the reason LOTR? What is Lot R is so popular? It's because its themes transcend. What is Lot R? I don't know what Lot R is. Yeah, so these themes, and Difficult Dog is a similar one that has a Christian theme, but isn't like, Jesus is here with his lions and tigers and bears, and he loves you, and that, and this sort of thing. That's so over the top that it sort of pounds you in the head with it. And I don't want to do that. I want to, instead, the story should be infused with meaning, but the story is very much a real story of a real dog. And it's a true story about my dog, Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog. All right. Boy, we're just going on and on. So Brandon, I hope do I need to sit here and drink this in front of you, or do you trust me that I'm going to drink this? I don't know. See, I'm a man of my word. I always do what I'm told, or at least when I agree. And so I agreed with him to do that. So thank you, and been very generous. Thank you very much. I think we're good. Does S&G sell a lot of books, or does he like ringing that damn bell? Good fella. No, I haven't been selling many books. I got to say, I feel like I've hit the wall on the book sales. And that's why I think, I don't know whether I'm pushing it too much or not enough, or what, or maybe people are sick of me and have bought, everybody's going to buy the book has said, everybody's going to buy the book has bought the book. I don't know. And that's why I'm saying Brucey's going to cost a lot of money, and it may be the last book, because if it doesn't make money, my wife's going to cut me off from making any more books. So I don't know. It's probably not the best model for doing anything. And I'm really happy. It did real well, the things that have had, but they just haven't been selling like I want. But maybe the Brucey story is great. I don't know. I want to do it because I want to do it. The Muse is calling me, and the book is written, and it's going to get done, and it'll be available for Thanksgiving. But haven't been selling many books lately. I don't know. It's just people, but it's okay. Everybody that buys it, I want them to read it. And I really like each one has its own sort of market. I'm really, see, the problem is I'm kind of stepping on my own work. I should just be pushing one book. Like I put Prepare out, and I should have just been pushing that everywhere, push. But then I went ahead and wrote the next one, and I got Brucey coming up. So Valhalla is in the chat. Did you read Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog, or did you hear it? What do you think? I don't know. Books are a big market. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a marketer. I think I'm doing something wrong at this point. But it's okay. Most people in my chat, most people that are here have bought it. So yeah, I'm stepping on them. It's like Prince. When Prince was releasing, he'd released 5 albums, or Buckethead releasing an album a week. So I recognize that I'm probably not following the best marketing path, but they kind of come when they come, and I'm inspired. And the thing is that nothing's getting worked on in that front right now because I'm working on a case. When I had the free time, then I'm devoting it to these things. And so right now the Brucey book is going on, but I'm not working on it. I'm paying somebody to illustrate it, and I'm just reviewing the illustrations. So, which you'll see when the illustrations come in. I've paid for the next 3 illustrations, and we'll see when they come in, and I'll share it with y'all. Yeah, and that's right. When they're released, they'll always be out there, and that's the thing. I've got a bunch of boxes here full of books that are sitting there, and I guess they're not going anywhere. Don't force the psych. I'm behind. Don't. So, Brandon, I don't force the psych. I've got it here. I'm working on it. It's almost done. I feel like I need to stay on until it gets finished, though. I do have to work tomorrow. What's going else out there? What else is going on the web? I don't know how to dump people into other streams. I don't know. Oh, I got to tell you one more thing. See there, I was meant to do this up front, but John C. Wright was great, wasn't he? I got to tell you something else that happened. Let's see. Oh, last night's stream. Now, I recognize it's a controversial topic, and we all have our own opinions. This whole Russian-Ukraine war. It's really, oh, I have to get permission from other channels first. I don't know. Well, it's a raise. I don't know. I'm sure I could get it, but I don't care. So I was doing this stream on the Russian, and I'm trying to just lay out some facts as I did a little. I was hoping to have a person on. The first time I've ever had somebody back out on me, my guest, and he kind of dumped it. So I had this outline of all this history between Russia and Ukraine, and so I went through this, right? Well, during my little presentation, I had a few good points, I think. And then I just went through factually and just tried to just state facts. And there's a couple more facts I need to add in. So people were giving me some good suggestions about things that they think I left out of my timeline. But, I put a timeline out so that people, because there's so much untruth in the world. There's so much propaganda. We're buried in it, And so I'm like, what's the facts here? Let's just talk facts. So I did that. And in the chat, I got this guy, a woman or person, I don't know what it was. Person started like this Holocaust denier person that started like ranting about Holocaust denial, how the Jews made it up and all this stuff, right? And at first it's like, okay, somebody's just trolling, but it was like boom, boom, boom. And it's the first person I have ever banned from any chat. I've never done that, but to me, I think I shared that beginning of the stream a little bit, but I'd never banned anybody. But this person's like this Holocaust denier, and I'm like, ban him. And then I talked about like how my uncle witnessed some of the freeing. He was a soldier in World War II and was brought in to view the prison camps, and he told me about what he had seen. And then the next point on that was I also had a friend of mine whose whole family was killed. Everybody in his family was killed during the Holocaust. So I talked a little bit about it, banned him, and talked about these two stories, right? Well, then in the comments section, I don't know if it was on the Rumble or the YouTube comments, which is up there. You can look at the comments section. Somebody comes in and says something like, I used to watch your channel, I watch your channel, Steve, but there's too much, there's all this anti-Semitism in your chat, so I'm unsubscribing, right? Which is interesting, which is like, wait a second now. What? Did you, and I said, did you see how I responded to that? I've never banned anybody in my entire, I like the chat. I want people to be free, just be kind and try not to insult and try to talk, truth and don't get out of control. But most of the time people are pretty good on my chat, right? But I'm like, what are you talking about? Then I thought about it. I'm like, I'll bet you, I'm just speculating here. And I don't want to be too much of a conspiracy theorist, but I will bet you that they saw that the Russians the Russian propaganda machine. They've got rooms full of propagandists out there. And they see my channel come up, and it says on YouTube and Rumble and Twitter that I'm going to be talking about the Russian-Ukraine war, right? And as soon as I get off the plantation and don't toe the Russian line 100%, they get in the chat and they start posting this anti-Semitism stuff and this Holocaust denial stuff, right? And then the chatter says, my channel's anti-Semitic. Now think about it. Why would they do that? Why? I think that this was an organized Russian troll attack. And it's an important thing for you to understand as a propagandist, because obviously the topic is this Ukraine-Russian, and the Russians have an interest in this. Why would they do that? Because one of the reasons for attacking Ukraine was to get rid of the Nazis, right? The fascists, the anti-Semites. That was one of the justifications for the attack on Ukraine. Well, when somebody feeds an alternative narrative that doesn't 100% toe the party line, well, what better way than to just lump me in with the rest of the fascists, right? It's an interesting little case study of how the propaganda machines work. And, when you're truth-telling, the liars want to slime you and label you. It's like, did you even watch how I responded to that? I mean, why would you post that? Is it really just a troll? I think it might be a little more organized than that, because I think that there are legitimate forces out there that want to lie to you and use these chats and the message thing to influence it. And, and like, you could be on either side, but we need to look at it from a balanced way, look at all the sides and have facts so we can make our decision-making process, right? Play and really look at things objectively, because we have the information. Right now, our Congress isn't doing it. Our president's not doing it. There's no discussion being on. The media is not doing it. Nobody's really discussing the issues and the truth about what's going on. We're just kind of blindly following the deep state in whatever they want to do. Is that really in our interest? Do we even know? Do we know what the truth is? Our president should be out there and explaining us what we're doing and why we're doing it. At least give us some context. Maybe the media should be giving us some history. I don't know. But we aren't getting any of that. Nobody's. So I tried to fill in some of those gaps with some facts, and I'm open. I mean, I have an open mind, and I'm trying to, if I've left out facts or I was wrong on some of my facts, then, I told them, email me, let's add them in or add them in the chat. But instead it's just like label, or you don't know what you're talking about or whatever. I'm like, really? It's like, we're not even discussing it. We can't even talk about the policies. I mean, we can't talk about anything. We can't talk about vaccines. We can't talk about our policies towards Ukraine and Russia. We can't. I mean, that's what's free. We're supposed to discuss this. I mean, maybe we all agree, maybe we disagree, but let's talk about it. But our whole media is poisoned with shutdown-itis and strange. Anyway, well, we're going to it's just ridiculous. Putin is getting crushed in Iraq. Yeah, that's what we have going on as our leader, our dear leader. Absolutely. Let's see. You repeated loads of war lies as factual last stream. Okay, you think so, Carlos? Well, comment on there with a fact that I got wrong, or a fact that I didn't include. I'm very open to those additions or subtractions. I don't really know where there's a lie. If I did lie, I have a lot of fidelity to the truth. Post it on there. So, anyways, I don't know. Oh, so molten salt is piling it on in the things. You're here for peace. PRS is better than Gibson. Come at me a row. Well, PRS is pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. About what Putin does with the soldiers in Chernobyl? Oh no, I think that's You don't think that the soldiers went into the Chernobyl plant? You can't tell what happens there at all. Okay, well, whatever. All right, man. Good night, all. And you all have been very nice. Thanks for sticking with me. I don't know what's going on with this chat. And it will be next time I'll be on will be Friday of next week. So I've got to get back to work tomorrow and next week in work calls. Long stream tonight. Thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. All right. God bless.